Styles, can I ask you something? Do you really like working on Kane stuff?
You really like busting people?
Yeah. I bust frauds, I bust phonies. I love it.
Have you ever busted anyone you know?
Yeah, I tried it. Doesn't make any difference. See, in my business, you soon find out that anybody's capable of anything. Think of it, they've done it.
Doesn't leave you much to believe in.
Yeah, but think of the upside. It doesn't leave you too much to be disappointed in either. The sooner we're off the planet, the better.
Now you sound like Kane. You really like busting people?
I bust frauds, I bust phonies. I love it. Soon find out that anybody's capable of anything. You should think of it, they've done it.
Doesn't leave you much to believe in.
Yeah, but think of the upside. It doesn't leave you too much to be disappointed in either. The sooner we're off the planet, the better.
Now you sound like Kane.
No, not me. You're the Kane lover.
I just like being scared.
Let's go. That's our boy. That's our boy with Operation Neptune, Rooks G. What's up, y'all? Let's go. Tonight, we're covering 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne and also the classic movie The Abyss by James Cameron. And this is going to be a different one. This is a little bit of a different one because, look, I've had this book on the list here for, I don't know, for the beginning of June, and I finally decided to cover it. And then we get all of this stuff that's just occurred in the media. So, what we're going to be doing is taking a look at not necessarily Oceangate per se, like the media stuff, but we are going to talk about how some of this plays into our literary analysis and how the meta reality that we live in now is coming full circle because reading 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, I, of course, thought of the movie The Abyss, the 1989 movie by James Cameron. It's a classic movie. Okay. Everybody thinks of Jim Cameron and they think of Titanic or they think of now with Avatar, Avatar 2. I recently told you I watched Avatar 2. Um, and those are relevant because of the nautical themes, the aquatic themes in those movies. But The Abyss is really his his one submarine movie that involves submersibles. And so I just found it interesting that today I saw Jim Cameron pop up in all of the MSM stuff giving his opinion about this thing because as he said in the interviews, he said the submersible community is a small community, right? Like it's got like 7 people in it or something. So of course he knew all of the passengers, he knew all of these people on the ship. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at the literature. We're also gonna, take a look at a couple of other things, namely Rimbaud's The Drunken Boat, which kind of goes hand in hand with, the Jules Verne book. They're both French, they're both around 1871, and also, of course, J Jim Morrison's Horse Latitudes, which is one of the great poems about the sea, which I'll just probably quote and just discuss in a cursory fashion. And then, also Oliver Wendell Holmes's The Chambered Nautilus. And all of those are gonna play into this because the ship or the submarine in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is called the Nautilus. We're also we've talked about Dante's Inferno a number of times, like in the last few streams that we've done. We did it in the House That Jack Built stream. We talked about it in Black Mirror. I talked about it on Boiler Room. And of course, that's going to play a role in this because of the Titans, because of Titanic and the Titan ship. So, I'll leave it up to other people to discuss the memes and discuss, the geopolitics of it. Also, I will say, and I was just on, check me out on TNT Radio because I was just on there with our friend Hesher and Lynn on their State of the Nation show just about an hour ago. And one of the things that I just keep in mind, we talked about this last night on Boiler Room also, is that, the memes, it's not up to me to like offer any kind of judgment. I mean, I think that the memes are a natural thing, a natural progression of what happens because, you know, we live in this world where they forced us into the meme warfare and, it, you know, getting memed off of the planet is just commonplace now for some of the people at the upper echelons in the pyramid structure, I'll say. But it's not up to me to offer any kind of judgment on that. I also don't want to say it in bad taste. I mean, look, you know, it is it. People lost their lives, and it. I especially there was a 19-year-old on board, right? So I don't that's not up for me to really talk about. What we're going to talk about is the fact that this whole thing plays into what we just talked about with Black Mirror and the gamification, media ready stories, the Navy, naval intelligence, and also literature and film. I mean, it's all like we live in this world where all this stuff is kind of coalescing, and I know it's not new, but because we live in the GR era, right? The postmodern world in this GR era, this G reset era, all this stuff coalesces and sort of works together to produce this weird, triple postmodern landscape of brokenness, and it's really easy, I think, to kind of fall into a black pill about this kind of stuff. But again, that's not really up to me to discuss. We're just going to discuss I'm going to give my takes on it, of course, because I have an opinion. I'm a human. I'm a human. I have dignity, and I have opinions on it, so that's fine. Shouts out to Jack Gallant right there, who drops $5 with no comment. Thank you, Jack Gallant. Appreciate you. If you want to support the stream, you can do that through the um, the links that are in the live chat or in the video description. You can also like and share, and please turn those notifications on. So, what do you guys want to start with? Do you want to start with just a coverage of kind of what is how these events that have happened relate to the book, and then go into the abyss, and then go into 20,000 leagues. I think that's what we'll do. That seems to be the most coherent thing, because a lot of this deals in sort of incoherence. At least it seems to be moved that way. I mean, I also can't help but think of a couple other things. T.S. Eliot's Death by Water section in The Wasteland, also the last lines of the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. So Hampton, how does it relate to Macbeth? So I don't know. I'm sure I can find some sort of correlation there. Well, but so yes, okay. So here's my take. Here's where I'll start. So a few weeks ago, I thought this was funny that on Boiler Room we were covering the Gladio Whales, right? So it was Hesher, Spore, Jay was there, and we were talking about, the whale attacks. And the whales have apparently been attacking the bonesmen yachts, right? Turn back to Connecticut. Biffy, the whales are forming a phalanx division. They look like some of our MK Naomi test subjects. So there's a group of traumatized whales, especially around the Mediterranean, who'd been sinking a bunch of yachts, right? And these are sailing yachts, kind of like I christened the Flying Wasp. Remember our Caddyshack stream? And what I thought was interesting was that they already knew the name of the ringleader. Her name is Gladys Blanca. That's the name of the white whale, right? She's not a white whale, but they call her Gladys Blanca because of her, I guess her colorized appearance in relation to other. She was a known orca, and that she was leading a group of phalanx division of Gladio operative whales in sinking ships. Now, this is I'm whatever about the science, okay, but I know that it's not unusual for orcas to do this. I know that whales have are one of the only animals on the earth that, well, I'm just gonna say animals and all this stuff that have what could be deemed a culture, because they, for one, the grandparents in the pod, of course it's a pod, but in the orca pod or in any kind of whale pod, but especially in orcas, um, the grandparents are unusual because they serve no real function in terms of the survival of the species, but they still remain part of the pod. So that's unusual in terms of the animal kingdom, is what I've read. Also, because whales have a unique language and they pass it down through they can be identified passing down through generations. They have that's what's can be deemed a culture. They also form planned attacks because that's how they hunt. You can watch any YouTube or nature video of orcas doing this. But what they said in these articles a month ago, just kind of basic articles, was that this whale seems to have been traumatized because of its encounters with human boats, and was pissed off. And so it was going after ships, that's what they said in the science articles. Okay. Now, Gladys is interesting because Gladys is I guess the subset. I'm sure someone will correct me on this, but just in basic slow boy terminology that I learned about whales, the Gladys is the name of the subset of the orca because they're killer whales, and because Gladys comes from essentially like the gladiator. That's also the origin of, that's the etymology of the word um, gladio, right? With Operation Gladio. And we know that whales often play a role in sort of a weird parallel role with military operations because, um, for instance, this is weird. So they said that the way that they found and were able to locate the Titan sub on the floor of the ocean and the wreckage was using the Navy systems underwater listening devices um, because they have this line of read about this years ago that they have a line of listening stations that are kind of go in a transatlantic fashion. Now, the telegraphic line is actually mentioned in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, where remember they set up the underwater line that goes from Europe to North America. And they have that with these very sensitive listening stations because they're trying to track submarines. Now, the reason that I thought that maybe, and this was brought up last night, the reason I thought that maybe they had not said anything about finding the wreckage until Thursday, even though the Navy said that Monday, was because if they had said it Monday when they had actually tracked when the implosion took place, then somehow I can imagine they would say that it gave away the location of subs, and that's highly classified, the exact location of subs of the submarines all over the planet. But apparently it wasn't like that. It wasn't because of that. It was these underwater listening stations. Now, those same stations play havoc with the whales' sonar abilities. So in this weird turn of events, the whales are mixed up with the Titan thing. I know that seems probably like, especially if you were coming in this out of context, you would think, what is this guy talking about? But do you see how that makes sense, at least in terms of some kind of figurative connection, right? Because we're all one, man. We all live on one planet, man. No, but you also the whale thing is weird because you anybody can go on Instagram reels or whatever and see the holographic images of the space whales, right, floating in the sky. Remember Star Trek One, or not Star Trek One, but one of the Star Trek movies. Was it the Voyage Home? The Voyage Home was about the whales and how they thought whales were aliens. And so there's something weird here about whales. Whales appear in one of the Avengers movies as one of the um, front line of one of the Vanguard. When the metaverse opens up and the Vanguard like space demons or whatever appear, the whales appear. So there's some sort of weird connection there, whether it's some sort of psychic meta connection. I don't know. The fact is, then this thing happened in the news and this really struck me because, I'd already been thinking about the Jules Verne book, and I'd already been thinking about the Jim Cameron movie, The Abyss. It just somehow it was in the psychosphere, man. And so then this appears, right? Now, I gotta say, if you were a full-on schizophrenic metaverse guy, right? Then this, like, simulation theory, I can imagine this story would be driving you insane because it's like there's so much to it that seems like a game or like it's not real. Now it is real, and it happened as far as we know, but I just think that this plays into one of the games. This is like the media game that we've been subject to for so long. So my example for this is like the whole thing with the controllers, right? I saw a video the other day, and it was like when the Titan was being tested, and they went down to the bottom of Puget Sound. This was like in 2019. They went underwater. They went to the bottom of Puget Sound, and the pilot was a former astronaut, and he is piloting it with a PlayStation 3 controller. Now that turned into a different control, an Activision controller, whatever it was for this one. But that's just kind of thing is very odd because it seems like it would be a joke. Okay. Now I get it. Now the other side of this though is that I just keep in mind that like when the media is all focused on a thing like this and seems to be pushing the fact that these people didn't they weren't subject to like the government regulations, the military regulations. What were they thinking? Then I start to kind of back off and I think, okay, but remember that thing about like American ingenuity, right? Where like remember the guy who invented the car that ran on water and it didn't take oil or gas. And so he's a pioneer. He was an explorer, right? What are they gonna say, man? What are they gonna say, man? That I was a kind man, that I was a wise man, that I had wisdom. Bullshit, man. You. Right? So what are they gonna say about these people? Well, they're either gonna say, "Oh, they're a crazy person," right? They invented the airplane, right? And then everyone uses it. So my point is, I know that probably sounds a little schizo, but my point is that there's something to be said for ingenuity and for people who, like, go against the rules and do this. Now, that being said, we're talking about the, elite billionaire class, so it doesn't really fall into that category, and there's all that stuff with that. The thing about the game controllers is weird. Also, the thing that struck me in terms of the language, because 'cause we're a literary channel, so the thing that struck me was the language. So, for one, an article I pulled up from The Independent, I can't even bother to pull it up here, I'm boomer teching it here. One of the things from The Independent said, "Oh, well, we suspect that, Paul-Henri, whatever his name is," I actually don't know his name, that's what I'm saying. Paul-Henri something, J Jim Cameron called him PH. Also, that's weird, pH, like pH balance, water, we're talking about water and we're in salt water, that's a weird. I just realized that, that's very weird. Anyway, so he said, the thing about these guys, where was I going with that? Uh, The Independent said, "We don't know if he was on the ship," and they said, "Yes, it's suspected that he was on the ship." Let me pull up the, actual article. I've got it right here in front of me. I can't pull it up on the screen, but I'll pull it up what it said here. It said, this is from The Independent. It said, in a statement, a spokesperson for the UK's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office said, "We are in contact with the family of a British man following reports of a missing submarine off the coast of North America." Okay, so they're saying a British man instead of Hamish, what was his name? Hamish something. He's the one of the billionaires who was on board the ship. Now, this Hamish guy was also on board, the submersible that went to the Marianas Trench, and he was also part of the Blue Origin flight from Jeff Bezos. So he's in this billionaire class. But I thought it was weird that they don't name him, but then later on in the article they say Oceangate Expedition CEO Stockton Rush and renowned French underwater explorer Paul-Henri Narguillet, that's his name, are also feared to be among those on board. Why are they feared to be? They can't confirm that they know that look, if a billionaire gets on a submersible, an experimental ship for tragedy tourism, okay, they know who's on the ship. They can't confirm that. Why are you so the verb there is very strange to me. That seems like almost like NLP, right? Also, it says, oh, the fact that it was called, so this is the first time I saw that it was called Oceangate. This was on Monday. So I thought that the title Oceangate is weird because it's ready made for a media political story because it's the same as Watergate, it's just Oceangate. Okay, now that might be, now I know we're just talking about words and it's, words don't matter, man, but words do matter. And of course, the connotation with something gate in terms of the media political sphere is obviously something that has to do with the political scandal because that's the suffix that we use for every political scandal. So I thought it was very weird that it was already ready made for that. Now, in reality, that probably has no connection to this, and they just named it that. But also, the it's weird because there's astronauts on board. There's an astronaut on board or a former astronaut, and in the video, he talks about, um, I posted this on Instagram. It's like, oh, he's piloting with a PlayStation 3 controller, and then he says, "I've crashed this shuttle many times." That was very weird that he said that. He might have been nervous. He might have been in the thing. He might have been in the situation, and he was talking about the simulations of not like a simulation man. I'm talking about like the actual computer simulations. And he had crashed it many times, or maybe he crashed the actual submersible many times because they were in an experimental phase. I don't know. But the fact is that you know, he's piloting this thing and he's talking about crashing shuttles, and they train astronauts underwater, and they part of the training for the Abyss, by the way, was in an old nuclear facility in South Carolina. So there just seems to be so much that's very strange about this. Again, I'm not like offering some kind of judgment on the people involved. I'm just saying it's very bizarre, and I can offer a sort of a commentary on the fact that when we're in this state where the media does this to us all the time and everything is some sort of war game or simulated or Jim Cameron goes on today and was talking about how he knew on Monday that it was there and he didn't know about the media charade. Well, the media charade So he's one of these guys. He's one of the members of this community. He's talking about how it's a media charade. So in other words, it's just another thing about the mainstream media. It's just very bizarre. So let's tie all that in to also, yeah, one more thing. The Ocean Gate, it's like we have the astronaut and we're talking about, that reminds me of Stargate, right? Now look, that's probably crazy, but I think of Stargate or Ocean Gate like you're going down to the gate, right? Like the portal to some other place. I'm not saying that they went to a portal to another place or they opened the dimension or that Yakin and Boaz are on the bottom of the ocean. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that in Dante's Inferno, they go through a portal. Remember, they use the golden bow. They go, or that's Virgil's Aeneid. Um, but Virgil is with Dante, right? And he's his guide in Dante's Inferno. They go into a portal and they go into the underworld, into the here's your word, into the abyss. Now, the other weird thing about this, the last part about the language, is that the ship is called the Titan, and it's going down. It's a submersible going down to view the wreckage of the Titanic, right? So the ship is called the Titanic because it's big. It could, you know, I've always wondered if there's some sort of Shakespearean connection because Titania, right, is the queen of the fairies in Midsummer Night's Dream, but it's not that. It's just that Titanic means it's large, right? And it's crossing over the abyss because it's going over the Atlantic Ocean. It's going from, Southampton to New York or whatever. But what is very strange is that in Greco-Roman mythology and in they clearly talk about remember Dante and Virgil come to this realm where they are below the city of Dis. They're down into the circles of hell. I don't remember what circle they encounter Tartarus, but Tartarus is down there. He's one of the Titans, and the Titans are the rulers of that circle of hell, and they keep people in the underworld in the abyss. So, in other words, the Titan is the demon of the abyss and is enslaved in the darkness of the underworld. So it just seems weird that your submersible is going down to into the darkness of the ocean where the realm of the Titans is and the Titanic, not realizing that the bad juju is that the Titans aren't allowed to leave. So you're in the Titan and you can't leave the underworld, and that's exactly what happened. Does that make sense? That's just very strange. That would be like, um, naming your ship the Icarus. We've discussed somebody be honking out there. Somebody, we have discussed the W.H. Auden poem about uh, the Bruegel painting, right, in the Fall of Icarus. Musée de Beaux Arts is what it's called, and it's about the fall of Icarus, the painting. So Icarus is the son of Daedalus, right? And he wants to fly too close to the sun. He doesn't heed his father's warning, and the wax on the wings melts, right? It's about aviation. But it's interesting because aviation and aquatics meld in the horizon because he falls flying down into the water. So it would be like naming your ship the Icarus. You would realize that that's probably not a good idea, right? So it's just very strange with the literary connotations. Please like and share the stream, and please think about supporting me. You can support me in the links provided. Let me drop a link here right now before I move on to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and the Abyss. You can support me on Super Chats. You can leave a comment. I'll read the comment. You can also support me on PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, which is obviously the best. And also, one last thing. This is my last stream before I go on my little holiday. I'll be streaming from down south once I get there. But if you want to help me make that trip, please think about supporting me. Also, I'll be back on Monday. I think Monday with our good friend David Patrick Harry because we will be doing a sponsor stream from our friend Amptown about the movie Bliss, which is a movie I'm very surprised. I had not heard of this movie, and I'm pretty OCD with movies, so but I watched it and it's pretty revelatory. So that was a good choice, Amptown. I think we might be covering that along with either Limitless or Simone, something else having to deal with simulations, metaverse, and computer bot girlfriends and all this stuff that is popping up in Black Mirror and all this other stuff in the metaverse and the Coon pods and all this stuff in real life. So we'll be doing that Monday. I will be down south. I'll be down in the homeland. Is all I'm going to say. You know where I'll be. I've been there before. Remember last time over Christmas we did our thing with David Patrick Harry down there. So I will be seeing my sister down there. So should we dive into? I guess I'll dive into 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea first, and I'm not going to do too much of a too deep of an analysis. I guess that's a pun on this book because one interesting thing about the book. Okay, so 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is Jules Verne, and book was published in serialized form. It's in you read the English translation. It's one of the most translated books in the world, and it actually they say that it came above Shakespeare in terms of translation, but that's probably one Shakespearean play. And Shakespeare's of course it's translated. Of course, the Bible is the most translated book in the world. Every year since the Bible existed, the the I guess especially the King James Bible. So since 16 what 11 since 1603 or 1611. 1611 I think is King James Bible. So since 1611 the King James Bible has been the most translated book in the world. And then you have Shakespeare. Of course, we've talked about Miguel de Cervantes and Don Quixote is one of the most translated books. That's the most translated novel in the world. But then also close to that is Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. This is a classic book. And the thing is that everybody knows the story of this book. Everybody knows it. Everybody's either I haven't been on the Disney World ride. Somebody was talking earlier about being freaked out on the Disney World ride, and it's sort of been adopted or adapted by Disney. There's a Disney film with Kirk Douglas, which is pretty. I don't know. It's a it's a good movie because it has James Mason in it, and James Mason is great. James Mason is a fantastic actor. I love he's got this liquid voice. So he plays Captain Nemo, but it's also weird because it like incorporates these songs. It's like published. It came out in like 1954, I think, or something. And so Kirk Douglas is got his like sailor shirt on, singing songs about seals and whales and all this stuff, and it becomes a little bit more lighthearted than even the book is intended because it actually has dark elements in it. So first of all, why is he called Captain Nemo? Well, let's see if I can do it. I can't really do a James Mason impression. Um, and tell me, how's he? Tell me, tell me, Brutus. Can you? He has like kind of a to his voice. Can you see your? I can't do it. I can't do it. Can't do it. Can't do it. We do it live. Do it live. I can't do it, James Mason. I'll have to work on that. So James Mason is Captain Nemo, and one of the things about Captain Nemo is that, of course, Nemo means no man or no one. And of course, this comes from Odysseus when he is talking to who is it? I think the Cyclops in the Odyssey. It's not in the Iliad, it's in the Odyssey. And the Cyclops asked him, "Who are you?" And in Latin, he said, or in Greek, sorry, in Greek, he says, um, "I am no man." I forget what it is in Greek, but in in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, he's Captain Nemo because he is no man. Now, this is because Nemo exists in a way, he's kind of an Uncle Ted character in a way, right? He's totally off grid, and that's the point of his living that way. So he designs and builds the Nautilus, which is this totally futuristic, like nuke powered submarine that can cut through ice. It's an icebreaker. It can go all the way to the Atlantic to the Antarctic. Uh, can penetrate Hyperborea. It finds the lost city of Atlantis. It goes to these underwater, underwater meta kingdoms and all this stuff, and he designs it, and it's really cool. It's a cool boat, or a cool ship, but he does that because Captain Nemo, who is, supranational, right? He's well, I guess he's a a true cosmopolite, right? He's a cosmopolitan, but he doesn't uh, ascribe to the cities or the countries of the world, partly because his family has been destroyed by clearly in the book, it's an indictment of imperialism because the book takes place at the height of the kind of Bismarckian era of realpolitik, and when the French and the Germans and the English were all vying for parts of Africa, and this is post-Napoleonic era where the English and the French were at war on the high seas. But he has been a victim of this, and his family's been destroyed. So he decides to use their mode of transport operation and live outside the bounds of they think decency. Civilization thinks that he lives outside the bounds of decency, but he lives outside of certainly the national boundaries, and he's able to go wherever he wants. Some of the weird parts of the book, like for instance, there's a part toward the end of the book where he talks about his bank. His bank is underwater, and he knows the location of all of the shipwrecks of the world, and he can just go and scoop up the Spanish doubloons off the seafloor. He crisscrosses the ocean at the bottom of the ocean like he's, driving on a highway. He knows all of the nautical charts, and he's a true master of the seas, but, uh, protagonist of the book calls him the archangel of death or the archangel of darkness because he also uses his will to destroy ships. He also, by the way, saves the people that he thinks are downtrodden and the innocent, and also certain animals. He's always there for the underdog. But he really, I see this book as a kind of a reflection of what Jules Verne took from obviously from Herman Melville. There's a lot in this book that is obviously a take on kind of a Eurocentric version, which is ironic because the being Eurocentric because he's sort of extra national, right? Eurocentric version of Ahab. Now, that's also weird because Ahab and the crew of the Pequod, they exist on the highest. They're clearly a cosmopolitan ship that represents all the cultures of the world, at least all of the sort of um, what Melville obviously describes as like primitive cultures that exist in this kind of animistic universe supporting the Luciferian monomania of Captain Ahab. But Nemo is slightly different in a way. I guess he is Nietzschean because, again, this is the Crispy the abyss, right? And he is staring into the abyss, and it's staring back at him. And he, in a way, he goes slightly mad. The climax of the book is probably the best part because he's fighting a giant squid. You know, the weird things about this book are that obviously every child in the late 19th century going into well into the 20th century knew this book and loved it. And you can see why, because it's a great adventure book and it's written as such. But it also is predictive and revelatory in a scientific sense. There's a lot in this book that came to pass. And that is because, sort of in the H.G. Wells sense, it's not okay, let me put it like this. So remember T.S. Eliot had that comment about Edward Arlington Robinson, where he said, Edward Arlington Robinson will not be known because he is the weather and I'm the weather vane. In other words, one kind of writer takes the winds of change and then just focuses them into a work of art. So we get the kind of result in prose of things that already exist. Now, Jules Verne did that a number of ways, right? He took what Melville had. He had seen the submarine in 1867 in France, and he used that as his inspiration. But that's not really the same thing because that's inspiration. He's using things that exist to talk about things that will exist in the future. The other type of writer is the weather vane, right? Which is person who's determining where the weather goes. Or in other words, one writer is like showing which way the wind blows in a Bob Dylan sense, and the other writer is the wind itself, right? So that's kind of a mixed metaphor, I know there, or an extended metaphor rather. But what I'm trying to say here, just to sort of summarize this point, is that I think Jules Verne is kind of a combination of both. My example, or rather my proof for that, um, is that he wasn't accepted as a member of the academic elite for a number of years, and it really wasn't until well into the 20th century, like in the 1960s and 70s, when academics started to write serious papers on Jules Verne and his impact on literature, history, and culture, and that he was taken seriously. He wasn't part of the Academy of Sciences or the Academy of Arts in France. He wasn't like a Victor Hugo character. But what's weird is that one of the papers that did that was 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 it Roland Barthes paper on his thesis on the drunken boat and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. So in other words, he takes what I've said about Rimbaud, right? Arthur Rimbaud, a French poet, 1854 to 1891, and his drunken boat, and uses that in correlation with Jules Verne to say this is the beginning of a new kind of movement. This is pre-modernist, but it's not really modernist because Jules Verne also, it's like he is existing at the height of the Darwinian evolutionary model, which you can see in a lot of the prose. But you combine that with Rimbaud, which is a totally symbolist metaphysicals universe where a season in hell becomes like almost like a Gnostic gospel. And you combine those and you have this strange through line through the 20th century that exists all the way up into now. Because even The Abyss, the movie, takes a lot from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. So one thing that annoys me about the book is the constant discussion of like the it's pedantic and there's a lot in the book about the scientific measurements and like well if you put voltage combined with the leaders in here then you will get and it's like this goes on forever and I'm not really interested in that but I do appreciate why he does that because he's giving concrete details and a kind of practical element for his prose, right? It makes it seem it makes the prose seem like it's absolutely concrete and believable, and it is in a number of ways. But it kind of gets easy to get bogged down. Um, Actually, I wrote on page 245 another whale attack, CF Gladys Blanca and Oceangate, because the book begins with a whale. They so what happens is these guys are in a ship and it gets attacked by what they think is a giant whale. And they end up naming it a narwhal, right? They say like they identify it as a narwhal and they say, look, only one whale could have pierced the side of this steamer, and that would be a narwhal. And then they ask this French natural scientist who ends up being the speaker in the novel whether this could be a narwhal, and he essentially says, well, it would have to be a narwhal that was like 50 times the size of a normal narwhal. So that really doesn't exist. And they say, yes, but do you think that it could be an undersea creature of some kind? And he says, well, I'm not saying that it's out of the realm of possibility. So then they write that in the papers. So then because they write that in the papers, he gets to New York and he's trying to make his way on a scientific mission to Saigon. Weird that yeah, he's trying to get to Saigon, and he can't get there because all of the ships have been, like, docked because of these constant attacks, right? It'd be like grounding all of the planes in the world because of, a big event, right? So, then what happens is the US government interesting, the US government approaches the protagonist and says, "We're gonna put you on a ship here, and we want you to look out for this ship." Now, that's interesting because that's not really often seen or discussed in the book how the thing that drives the book or that drives the narrative is the fact that the government wants to partner with big government wants to partner with big science to go after the um, either rogue sea element or what they suspect is probably the case a rogue cosmopolitan billionaire in a death ship. And so that's exactly what happens, and he comes across it, and so they're out sailing, and they haven't seen anything for many days, and then finally, the captain gives them, like, 3 more days, before he's gonna turn back because everybody wants to go back, and then all of a sudden, they spot the death whale off of the bow, and it rams into the ship. Now, this also plays you can't help but think that Jules Verne was inspired, obviously, by the Monitor and the Merrimac, right? The 2, ironclads in the War of Northern Aggression that had just concluded. And before the book, also there's the first, I guess, true submarine in 1867. One thing that I think that was pretty enlightening to me, and I remember reading about this after watching Hunt for Red October for the billionth time. One of the interesting things was that I didn't know that submarines or U-boats did not submerge to the depths that they do. I mean, for many years. Now that seems obvious probably to people watching, right? But now submarines can go to, pretty incredible depths. They can't go to 20,000 feet like to the Titanic, which is why, or at least they claim they can. Because of they don't have, they're not equipped for that, and that's not really the point of them. They're supposed to navigate under the sea. Which, by the way, did you know look, forgive me if you know this, but most people don't actually know this about the title because when you see 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, people automatically think that it's a voyage about going down to the bottom of the ocean because they're confusing this and Journey to the Center of the Earth, which is also Jules Verne. All the title implies is that they are transversing the globe underwater and they're going 20,000 leagues in distance, but they are underwater. So it would be like walking 20,000 leagues on land. You're just going a distance, right? Fathoms is depth. Fathoms are depth. Leagues are distance. So, for instance, we've done the Tempest, right? Full fathom 5. We've done the Tempest. Fathoms are full fathom 5. I bury my book, right? This is Prospero, played by Shakespeare, probably in the production because he's burying his book of magic, which is his, what would be end up being his first folio. But I just, forgive me if you already know that. I know it's just many people kind of that goes by the wayside. People kind of forget that, or they conflate the two works. So that's what that is. But anyway, so they get rammed by the robot whale, which ends up being the Nautilus. And interestingly, who else took a cue from this, by the way? But Ian Fleming. Remember, this occurs at the beginning of Doctor No. When they go to the island in the Bahamas and they're looking for Doctor No's place, um, what's Bond's friend's name, in Doctor No, who takes him to the island? And he says, "No, there's a fire-breathing dragon there." And so it's not a whale, but it's a fire-breathing dragon, but it's actually a ship with a flamethrower. But it plays on the sensibilities of the native population, and the this book makes a case that it's not just the native population or the primitive natives, as the imperialists called them right at the time, and there's that whether that's true or not. We're talking about the upper echelons of the government. First of all, knowing that this is probably a rogue billionaire in their own class, but also it could be a sea creature because it's meant to look like a sea creature. So I just thought that was interesting that Fleming does the same thing in Doctor No. Um, so anyway, the main guy and Ned, who's played by Kirk Douglas in the movie, if you want to watch that. But the main guy, the scientist, and his manservant, who's actually in the movie also, that's Peter Lorre, and Peter Lorre's great. Peter Lorre said about his role in the film, this is the only film I've ever been in where I wasn't cast as the giant squid." So at least he had a self-deprecating sense of humor. I thought that was pretty cool. So anyway, they get crashed into by the ship, and then they they swim over to like a mast that they're floating on, and then they make their way over to this steel wrapped ship, and they walk right down into the bowels of the ship because the door is open for them. The gate is open for them, the ocean gate, and they are met by eventually by Captain Nemo, and Captain Nemo then spends the rest of the book taking them on this long adventure across the globe and showing them that the sea gives as much as land does. So, for instance, there's a great part where they're sitting there and they're smoking tobacco, and he says, "Where'd you get this tobacco?" And Captain Nemo says, "The sea gives us everything that land gives us, but it's different." So the tobacco is made of a nicotine seaweed, and I thought that was cool. There's a part where they get milk from the sea calves, they get, they get their salt from the sea. Basically, they get all of their meat and drink from the ocean the same way that they get it from land, but they never need to go on land. Remember, I mentioned that even the banks are underwater because what better bank would there be than the shipwreck at the bottom of some desolate oceanscape where nobody knows where it is except for you. So you just go, you need your gold bullion, you go down there and get it. I thought that was pretty cool in the movie. Hmm. Jason says in the chat, "Oh no, Bluetooth isn't working down here, guys." Interesting that Bluetooth is also a nautical theme because Bluetooth is named after Harold Bluetooth, the Nordic Viking, and that's why the symbol if you look at your symbol of Bluetooth, I mean, I know y'all know this, but if you look at the symbol for Bluetooth, it's runes, right? They're Germanic runes. So that also in a way plays a weird nautical theme to this. Um, Also, electronic waves, we're talking about waves, everything sort of becomes oceanic in this sense. So a couple of other things, yeah, so chapter 7 is called An Unknown Species of Whale, and I think Jules Verne was particularly cognizant of Moby Dick during this book. He didn't just wanna write another Moby Dick. We've already had the whale book. Moby Dick, remember, if you go back to my stream, Luciferian Monomania about Captain Ahab, the book gives us everything we need to know about, the, Cetarians, about the whale cultures and the whale creatures, and everything you'll need to know about, spermaceti and all that stuff, right? Somebody else also mentioned, I think before we started something, and Ruckus brought it up last night, have I ever read Michael Crichton's Sphere? Now, Michael Crichton's Sphere also plays a role in this. Crichton we need to do a Crichton book because when I think of Michael Crichton, I think of, you know, the kind of, I don't know, it's not transhumanism, but a kind of weird symbiosis between adventure, techness, right, and technology, and future tech, and then government and nature. So there's always this weird, sort of, remember the Andromeda strain playing all over the place right before Karanka started? But I always think of Jurassic I remember reading Jurassic Park for the first time in 6th grade, right after it came out. I've read, um, Congo a few times, and, what's the other one? Rising Sun. I always think of Rising Sun. If I was gonna start with a Crichton book, I'd read Rising Sun. That's a great book. That book also, by the way, predicts virtual reality. Remember, there's a whole scene in the book about, accessing the files for the the Nakatomi Corporation or whatever it is in the book through virtual reality. They keep them in a metaverse. They keep the files, the digital files in the metaverse, and that book came out in what, like, 1993 or something? So that's a pretty interesting one. But this one talks about chapter 7 talks about the unknown species of whale, and um it says, "This unexpected fall so stunned me that I have no clear recollection of my sensations at the time. I was at first drawn down to a depth of about 20 feet. I'm a good swimmer, though without pretending to rival Byron or Edgar Poe, who are masters of the art. And in that plunge, I did not lose my presence of mind. 2 vigorous strokes brought me to the surface of the water. My first care was to look for the frigate. Had the crew seen me disappear? Had the Abraham Lincoln veered round? Would the captain put out a boat? Might I hope to be saved? The darkness was intense. I caught a glimpse of the black mass disappearing in the east, its beacon lights dying out in the distance. It was the frigate. I was lost. Interesting that it's a black mass and that he's looking for this billionaire boat. Right. Help, help, I shouted, swimming towards the Abraham Lincoln in desperation. My clothes encumbered me. They seemed glued to my body and paralyzed my movements. I was sinking. I was suffocating. Help! This was my last cry, my mouth filled with water. Struggled against being drawn down the abyss. Suddenly, my clothes were seized by a strong hand, and I felt myself drawn up to the surface of the sea. And I heard, yes, I heard these words pronounced in my ear: "If master would be so good as to lean on my shoulder, master would swim with much greater ease." I seized with one hand my faithful Conseil's arm. "Is it you? Is it you?" said I. "You?" "Myself," answered Conseil, "and waiting master's orders." That shock threw you as well as me into the sea? No, but being in my master's service, I followed him. I love how the guy always uses the third person when he's talking about his master, right? Just like Renfield with Dracula. Shouts out to Nico out there. He drops 50 bones, 50 sea bones. He drops 50 aquabucks and says, let's revisit the movie Strange Days. Very eager to hear your analysis. Hope was all is well with you and yours. Yeah, it's very interesting, Nico. And you had talked about Strange Days a while back. Strange Days, of course, is directed by Catherine Bigelow, and so Jim Cameron had something to do with that because remember they were I don't know if they were married at the time, but Strange Days obviously named for the Doors song and with Ray Fiennes and is it Angela Bassett? I didn't know, by the way, that the Fat Boy Slim song Right Here, Right Now, the major sample in that comes from the movie Strange Days, and I was just listening to that song, so synchro. Yeah, so we need to revisit that. Call. The reason that I cited this particular chapter is because he mentions Edgar Allan Poe and Lord Byron. Now we've done streams on both of those. In fact, we did a whole stream on our Polish friend Baginski's channel over there, which is somewhere in my library of streams now. And remember we did that in January, and that was on Arthur Gordon Pym. We did a whole stream analyzing Edgar Allan Poe's Arthur Gordon Pym. That one's interesting because you remember that is one of the first stories where a character goes to Antarctica, and that is about how when they get to Antarctica, they see a civilization that exists there. There's also Edgar Allan Poe's Descent into the Maelstrom. Remember, it's all about a sea voyage. Edgar Allan Poe also is from Richmond. And the reason that I like to mention that he mentioned Byron here is because Byron also was known as a strong seaworthy guy. Byron, of course, we covered Lord Byron and the biography of Lord Byron early on in this channel. And Byron seemed to be first the victim of the kind of eyes wide shut elite pyramid paradigm, and then a player in it, according to that book. But Byron was noted. He became famous because of his club foot. His club foot actually allowed him he took advantage of his disability and became a major swimmer. So he was a great swimmer, and he was one of the first people to swim the English Channel. So when you think of, at the time, especially in the 19th century, the great swimmers, you think of Edgar Allan Poe and Lord Byron. So that's why I cited that particular chapter. Also, we get description of lungs on page 57, which is interesting because that deals with the Oceangate thing that just happened in the air. And this says the second stranger merits a more detailed description. A disciple of Gratiolet or Engel would have read his face like an open book. He's talking about the characters on board or aboard the Nautilus. I made out his prevailing qualities directly self confidence, because his head was well set on his shoulders and his black eyes looked around with cold assurance, calmness, for his skin, rather pale, showed his coolness of blood, energy, evinced by the rapid contraction of his lofty brows and courage, because his deep breathing denoted great power of lungs. So that's supposed to be symbol and simulacra, right? Of the fact that they're on board this ironclad ship that also becomes an Unterseebooten, becomes a U-boat submarine under the water. I know you know that. I like how the word describes exactly what it is. Submarine becomes an even more Germanic version of the Unterseebooten, which is just the undersea boat, right? I love how the anglicized Germanic languages do that with words. They become onomatopoetic in that sense. Um, on page, let's see, 76, we get a great passage about the sea that Captain. This is one of Captain Nemo's orations about the power of the sea, and he says, this is in the chapter 10 of the book, because I know your pages are going to be different if you have this. Man of the Seas, chapter 10 in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. He says, you like the sea, Captain? And here's how Captain Nemo answers. He says, let me move this a little bit. He says, yes, I love it. Yes, I love it. How do you do, James Mason? Yeah. Yes, I love it. Yes, I love it. The sea is everything. It covers seven 7/10 of the terrestrial globe. Its breath is pure and healthy. It is an immense desert where man is never lonely, for it feels life stirring on all sides. The sea is only the embodiment of a supernatural and wonderful existence. It is nothing but love and emotion. It is the living infinite, as one of your poets has said. In fact, Professor, I'm not doing a James Mason, I'm just reading the passage now. In fact, Professor, nature manifests herself in it by her three kingdoms: mineral, vegetable, and animal. That, by the way, that was probably taken by Gilbert and Sullivan and put into Pirates of Penzance, right? Animal, mineral, and vegetable. Remember the song by the uh the captain or whatever he is, and I played the Pirate King when I was in school. I played the Pirate King in the Pirates of Your Pants is what we call what we call that play. It's not that funny, I know, but whatever. The sea is the vast the sea is the vast reservoir of nature. The globe began with sea, so to speak, and who knows if it will not end with it. It is in it is supreme tranquility. The sea does not belong to despots. Upon its surface, men can still exercise unjust laws, fight, tear one another to pieces, and be carried away with terrestrial horrors. But at 30 feet below its level, their reign ceases, their influence is quenched, and their power disappears. Ah, sir, live in the bosom of the waters. There only is independence. There I recognize no masters. There I am free. Captain Nemo suddenly became silent in the midst of this enthusiasm by which he was quite carried away. For a few moments he paced up and down, much agitated. Then he became more calm, regained his accustomed coldness of expression, and turning toward me, "Now, Professor, if you wish to go over the Nautilus, I'm at your service." And he rose and he goes over the parts of the Nautilus. But that is one of the most beautiful passages in the novel because this gets to what Captain Nemo is. He is no man because in a sense, he is everyone and no one. He wants no identity according to your BS social constructs back in civilization, man. No, but really, this guy, in all seriousness, this guy, he's sort of his identity has been submerged into the identity of the waves of the sea, and he just simply becomes a mariner, right? He's like a classical mariner. He becomes Odysseus on the island of the Cyclops, but he has no identity because he doesn't want to be identified by the governments of the world, and because here he is free. He can live without a name. Now, our name is sacred to us, right? God knows our name, and this guy has a name, but it's like the people on the ship and the people that he's railing against are almost unworthy of his name because he's created his own sort of world. Now, the I don't wanna say that this is another Gnostic book, I'm tired of all the Gnostic elements in especially in films. I'm tired of that doesn't mean that they don't exist, but I'm tired of, I think at this point, it's like everyone knows this, right? We all know and are able to identify the Gnostic elements of the prison planet, and the person who is living in this sort of false creation has to break on through to the other side, out of the prison planet, and transcend to the other realm where he can meet the true creator, right? And usually this ends up being some sort of Luciferian monomania where the guy wants to destroy humanity because we want he wants to get back to the world of forms, right? But it's like, look, we get that. So let's just take the story and say that um I also don't want to say just that the normie analysis that it's a polemic against 19th century imperialism and that this guy is some sort of Nietzschean Superman but on the ocean. Right? That's also valid, but it seems to not really get at what the book is. I mean, if anything, we could just say it's an adventure story. It's an adventure story. It's a story of a guy who doesn't want to be part of the system and he wants to use his ingenuity and live outside the system. Problem becomes when he starts to be a villain and he starts to go after other ships, right? He starts to go after other ships and starts sinking these ships and sinking them in the bottom of the sea just because they're in his territory, and his territory is the entire ocean, right? So, you know, that's where the kind of Bismarckian madness of the 19th century reaches its denouement, I suppose. And We could also say that the book is some sort of statement on social Darwinism and evolution gone to its absolute extent, where Nemo is like the master of men and the ocean, and he's going to exist because he uses human ingenuity to outwit everybody else. Okay, fine, right? Whatever. I just think that if anything, I would say Nemo represents the kind of classical archetype that we still see today, where we have billionaires who, yes, they use their ingenuity, yes, they use their funding, and yes, they use their stuff, and they're able to kind of become masters of nature in a way. But you always have to beware of hubris, right? Because you're not the master, and because this guy, yeah, I'm wearing my scuba shirt, because this guy ends up going to the very depths of the abyss that he thinks he's master of, and that we just saw this, right? And I say that, um, not with I don't mean to say that tongue in cheek at all. I'm saying that, genuinely and without irony. We see on page 171 the zodiacs and the fortunes of the sea says. I'm going to finish up with this book in a second and move on to the abyss now. But it says the captain's fingers were then running over the keys of the instrument, and I remarked that he touched only the black keys, which gave to his melodies an essentially Scotch character. Soon he had forgotten any presence and had plunged into a reverie that I did not disturb. I went up again and onto the platform. Night had already fallen, for in this low latitude, the sun sets rapidly and without twilight. I could only see the island indistinctly, but the numerous fires lighted on the beach showed that the natives did not think of leaving it. I was alone for several hours, sometimes thinking of the natives, but without any dread of them, for the imperturbable confidence of the captain was catching. I love the unity and variety there. He's talking about here versus there versus everywhere. So we have variety, but he unifies it with, like what Walt Whitman did in Song of Myself, right? He uses the "huh" sound, the cacophonous "cuh" sound to unify his thoughts on this and to say that everything seems to be at peace, at least on this vessel, but without any dread of them. For the imperturbable confidence of the captain was catching, sometimes forgetting them to admire the splendors of the night in the tropics. My remembrances went to France in the train of those zodiacal stars that would shine in some hours' time. The moon shone in the midst of the constellations of the zenith. That's wonderful. That's a wonderful sentence because the prepositional phrases there serve to mimic the undulations of the sea. So it's often important, like what Jack Kerouac says about believing in the holy contour of life. It's often important when you're reading literature to get into this kind of wave. I don't have advice for readers, okay, or for people who want to read, but I will say, but actually, but I will say that one thing that seems to be obvious when you become a reader, or if you are a reader, is that books, especially great books, or especially great books with passages of prose, start to function as oceanic waves where it's like your brain and the language in the book start to coalesce and they become one thing and you're riding this wave. That's why you don't want to put the book down. Right? Hopefully, I'm not redlining. I see there's probably a ton of people on the internet right now, so hopefully my connection is good. If my connection ain't good or anything goes out, just be patient because 'cause it'll come back. Okay, so, um, let me skip just to, he talks about Gladys Blanca, he talks about, let's see. Oh, one thing that was okay, I'll just finish up with this. A couple of other things that I got out of the book were that, 1, um constant mention is made of Matthew Fontaine Maury, who was the, sort of cartographer of the seas, the master of the seas, especially in the 19th century, and his oceanic tables and nautical charts are still used to this day, and I just mentioned him because I lived looking at the Maury Monument, for, let's see, for 4 years or something. I looked at Maury and the statue of Maury every single day. I would go out on my balcony and I would look and he was right there. I don't mean right there like I'm looking 100 yards away. I mean like my Kondo looked right at the statue of Mori. So it's one of those weird signposts that occurs in literature, this thing that you're so familiar with, and then it almost seems foreign when it comes up. Thank you, Kristen. You had a couple small little glitches, but not much. Thank you, Kristen. Appreciate you. Keeping it real here. Thank you for because I don't know, because I'm watching this and I'm just babbling on, and I don't hopefully, hopefully we're a good connection. I gotta raise this thing a little bit because I'm a little low. I'm a little low down here. Um, okay. Usually I don't try to mess with this during the stream, but hopefully that's a little better. Anyway, um, so on page 277, another thing that came to mind was the fact that Captain Nemo functions just like Mustafa Mond and in Brave New World, and even V in V for Vendetta. He's another one of these, uh, not reclusive because he's not reclusive, but he at times he is hermetic, and he sort of seals himself up into this hermetic shell or nautilus where he has all of the classics of the world and all the great art because it almost functions as his sort of neo Eden, right? He's trying to create a new Eden for himself because now look, part of that is because, for instance, remember in V for Vendetta, we have a satanic character who is trying to start a neo-Gnostic Eden again, right? Um, and Mustafa Mond, is this master of the world who is the one guy allowed to read Shakespeare. But Nemo is slightly in the same vein. He has the same sort of temperament as these guys, but it's like the world has come to a sucky place where nobody understands art, and all this art is the greatest of human minds, right? And I think Nemo and these other 2 guys do realize that, and perhaps they would agree with me, perhaps not Mustafa Mond, or at least not explicitly so, but that, art is about art concerns itself with our relationship with God, who we are, why are we here on this earth, on this planet, and our relationship with each other. What are we to do? Now, of course, Mustafa Mond wants to use that to master everyone and rule over everyone, right? Nobody else is allowed to have it, but so does Nemo in a way because he keeps all this stuff to himself, sealed up in his ironclad submarine, right? And he becomes a kind of a hermit, hermetically sealed in this nautilus or chambered nautilus. Now, I'm going to read the Oliver Wendell Holmes poem in a minute about the chambered nautilus and how the it represents. I mean, we even see it looks like a creeper spiral on the front of this, but it's of course but it also represents the even the cover art of this is like looking through the portal and seeing the creeper spiral or the descent into the nine circles or even the HP Lovecraft, tentacles of the underworld or the deep. But he seals himself up in this place because nobody else is capable of understanding him or his worldview. And he starts to want this new world. And that's why he takes on these 2 people. One of the things in the book is like, why does he rescue this scientist and his servant? Well, I guess because they represent the sort of archetypes of the late 19th century, what we talked about with politics and Darwinism and science. One of the guys is a natural science scientist, and he wants to sort of have them to propagate his story, but also to kind of insulate him from the outside world. He's teaching them just like they're teaching him. But it's also like he's lonely. He's lonely in his and he's lonely even though he has everywhere to go and all the time in the world to do it. So this says these wonders of nature, page 277 in this book, these wonders of nature, these masterpieces of art, amongst which for so many days my life had been concentrated, I was going to abandon them forever. I should like to have taken a last look through the windows of the saloon into the waters of the Atlantic, but the panels were hermetically closed, and a cloak of steel separated me from that ocean which I had not yet explored. I also, on page 254, there's an interesting um, discussion, which to me brought out logic versus liberty in this book and how Nemo is a character who wants to use logic to attain absolute liberty, absolute freedom to do whatever he wants. That's why he ends up killing people because he's he acts with impunity and he's not accountable to anyone. So he's sort of becoming his own kind of satanic god in this place. But what it says is, Mr. Aronnax, your arguments are rotten at the foundation. You speak in the future. We shall be there. We shall be here. I speak in the present. We are here and we must profit by it, he says. Interesting. Interesting in light of imperialism and the industrial revolution attitude, post Enlightenment industrial revolution attitude that's still come to pass. I'm just trying to fix the microphone here. Sorry. Nate says, that is not dead, which can eternal lie. And with strange eons, even death may die. On page 288, we get the stony maze and the shining mountain, which so the book sort of starts to become a Masonic quest at this point. But he says, could I find down there a whole colony of exiles who, weary of the miseries of this earth, had sought and fought independence in the deep ocean? All these foolish and unreasonable ideas pursued me. In this condition of mind, overexcited by the succession of wonders continually passing before my eyes, I should not have been surprised to meet at the bottom of the sea one of those submarine towns of which Captain Nemo dreamed. Our road grew lighter and lighter. The white glimmer came in rays from the summit of a mountain about 800 feet high. But what I saw was simply a reflection, developed by the clearness of the waters. The source of this inexplicable light was a fire on the opposite side of the mountain. In the midst of this stony maze, furrowing the bottom of the Atlantic, Captain Nemo advanced without hesitation. He knew this dreary road. Doubtless he had often traveled over it and could not lose himself. Followed him with unshaken confidence. He seemed to me like a genie of the sea. As he walked before me, I could not help admiring his stature, which was outlined in black on the luminous horizon. What an excellent passage about this almost titan of the sea, taking us back sort of full circle. I'm not gonna take you to the passages at the end of the book, even though the very last chapter of the book, before the epilogue, is wonderful. Um, uh, and that's where the language sort of it definitely reaches its climactic moment, because it really becomes almost like Rambo's Drunken Boat at that point. So I thought I would read just a little bit. You may never have heard of this poem, but it's one of the most influential works of literature, especially of the 20th century. And this is Arthur Rimbaud's. That's Rimbaud right there when he was 16. He was a 16-year-old prodigy, a total genius, who wrote only really two great works, and that's it. And then he abandoned literature because literature took everything out of his soul, and because he was shot in the wrist, with a revolver by the creeper Verlaine, and then he ran off and, joined the Dutch Navy, sailed to Java, deserted there. He, walked across the Italian Alps in the midst of one of the worst blizzards of the century, walked across down into Switzerland, walked across England. I tried to I mean, I really, took a lot from his life reading it as a teenager, and when I moved to Europe, I did some of the same trips. I walked all the way across England, across the Yorkshire Vales, and through the Lake District. I went up, sort of right onto the border of Scotland along Hadrian's Wall. I walked down the east coast of England. I walked, across huge parts of France. I walked across the entire country of Liechtenstein, which is only 5 miles wide, but I walked from Austria into Switzerland. And so I took a lot from Rimbaud, and his poem, The Drunken Boat, is one of the great poems of all time. So he says, and it's a short poem. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to read a couple of excerpts from this. He says, as I was this is French, but I'm going to read the translation. I think this translation is by Oliver Bernard. The best one is by Louise Verizet. I've got all the translations of Rimbaud, but it's prose poems, right? The best words in the best order, and it starts to become prose because the form has to match the content. The form is about the undulations of the sea, and the verse can't hold the hugeness of his content. So he's saying, as I was floating down unconcerned rivers, I no longer felt myself steered by the haulers. Gaudy redskins had taken them for targets, nailing them naked to colored stakes. I cared nothing for all my crews carrying Flemish wheat or English cottons when, along with my haulers, these uproars were done with. The rivers let me sail downstream where I pleased. When suddenly, he says, into the ferocious tide rips last winter, more absorbed than the minds of children, I ran, and the unmoored peninsulas never endured more triumphant clamorings. The storm made bliss of my seaborne awakenings. Lighter than a cork, I danced on the waves which men call eternal rollers of victims for 10 nights without once missing the foolish eye of the harbor lights. He says, "I've come to know the skies splitting with lightning, and the waterspouts, and the breakers and currents. I know the evening and dawn rising up like a flock of doves, and sometimes I've seen what men have imagined they saw. I've seen the low-hanging sun speckled with mystic horrors, lighting up long violet coagulations like the performers in antique dramas, waves rolling back into the distances, their shiverings of Venetian blinds. I've dreamed of the green night of the dazzled snows, the kiss rising slowly to the eyes of the seas, the circulation of undreamed of saps, and the yellow-blue awakening of singing phosphorus. I have followed for whole months on end the swells battering the reefs like hysterical herds of cows, never dreaming that the luminous feet of the Marys could force back the muzzles of snorting oceans. I've struck, do you realize, incredible Floridas, where mingle with flowers the eyes of panthers in human skins, and rainbows stretched like bridles under the sea's horizon. With herds, I've seen the enormous seething traps where a whole leviathan rots in the reeds, downfalls of waters in the midst of the calm, and distances cataracting down into abysses. Glaciers, suns of silver, waves of pearl, skies of red hot coals, hideous wrecks at the bottom of brown gulfs where the giant snakes, devoured by vermin, fall from the twisted trees with black odors. So you should read. You should read this. You should read this. His language is like visceral. It's like he puts together words that you would never put together, and not in a surrealistic sense or for the sake of being imaginary. It's like this is truly what they are meant. He truly means exactly what the thing is. He describes it in this kind of weird mystical language where emotion and logic coalesce and turn into words on the page. So definitely, read Arthur Rimbaud, and, uh, the other thing that I'll mention is I could probably talk about I could probably before we get to The Abyss, Jim Cameron, which we haven't even got to yet, but I could probably talk about, Billy Budd. I read Billy Budd by Herman Melville. This is a short book. You can read this in, like, 30 minutes. And this is an interesting book because I'll just mention briefly. So here's my quick analysis of Billy Budd. So this is Herman Melville's last book, and and it was published posthumously, but it's about a character named Billy Budd who is almost a complete virtuous character, and he's like this innocent character who's aboard the ship, and he stands out from the other mariners because he almost is like a Belvedere Apollo. Like he's this sort of otherworldly character, but he is accused falsely by one of the guys on the ship of like basically like he throws out the water on the guy. The guy is he's the cop on the ship, and he throws out the water on him, and the guy accuses him of like desecrating his position on the ship, and then it gets into this battle of wits, and then anyway, the guy is killed, and it's a real tragedy. And all I'll say about it is um, that it reminds me at times of there's a lot in this about the aristocracy versus the people, right? And how it's weird how Herman Melville is able to put this hierarchy on the ship, and of course, the ship, even the commercial shipping, has this hierarchy, this natural hierarchy, but it becomes so much more, almost spiritual in terms of the way that Melville shows it because it becomes a, microcosm of society almost, but on an almost spirit level, if that makes sense. He says, let's see, I'll just read this one section in chapter 5. It talks about in the Navy, he was popularly known by the appellation Starry Veer. He's talking about the captain of the ship. How such a designation happened to fall upon one who, whatever his sturdy habits, was without any brilliant ones, was in this wise: a favorite kinsman, Lord Denton, a free-handed fellow, had been the first to meet and congratulate him upon his return to England from the West Indian cruise, but the day previous, turning over a copy of Andrew Marvell's poems, had lighted, not for the first time, however, upon the lines entitled Appleton House, the name of one of the seats of the common ancestor, a hero in the German wars of the 17th century, in which the poem occurs the line, "'Tis This 'tis to have been from the first in a domestic heaven nursed under the discipline severe of Fairfax and the starry Vere. So the captain gets his name, this pseudo poetic name from a Marvell poem. Remember Marvell wrote to his coy mistress, right? Um, and at my back I always hear time's winged chariot hurrying near, right? Which is a carpe diem YOLO type of poem. Uh, same with Robert Herrick's uh what else did he say? Had we but whirled enough in time, this coin, this lady were no crime, right? Marvell. Um, I forget the Herrick line. To make much of time. Gather ye rosebuds while ye may, all time is still flying, and this same flower that smiles today, tomorrow will be dying, Herrick says. So anyway, I'm not gonna do the rest uh of Billy Budd, but it is an interesting book to read if you're interested in this kind of nautical theme because it's different from Moby Dick, and it's just much shorter, if that makes a difference. And it's also about the dichotomy between duty and standing up for what you believe in at all costs, even your life, versus appearances and manners. Okay, which is increasingly relevant in the times we live in. I also think of the Jim Morrison poem "Horse Latitudes." He says, when the still sea conspires in armor and her sullen and aborted currents breed tiny monsters, true sailing is dead. Awkward instant, and the first animal is jettisoned. Plagues furiously pumping their stiff green gallop, and heads bob up, poise, uh, immute, uh, pause, consent, immute nostril agony, carefully refined and sealed over. That poem's about how the Spanish galleons would be overloaded when a storm came up, and so they would offload all of the horses that they were transporting to the New World, and they would just drown in the sea. It's a terrible poem, but the way that that's probably Jim Morrison's one of his best poems, because the language of the poem really gets at it really conveys the sense of sheer horror in terms of the audio, right? This sort of otherworldly screaming that you get, in the poem. Also, Paul Muldoon won his Pulitzer Prize for, Horse Latitudes with the same name of that. So, and then before we get to the abyss, the last thing I'll say is C.S. Eliot, of course, is great when talking about the ocean and anything oceanic, Oceangate, because remember the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, which we've covered, discusses this. This came up on Boiler Room a couple times. Remember that the end of Prufrock, he says, I'll just quote it. He says, "I've heard the mermaids singing each to each till human voices wake us and we drown." Right. So that's about um, you hear the siren song of the sea, and it has this otherworldly, almost occultic call in the loneliness of the ocean, and it drives people mad. It drives them to do these weird things that they do where they end up being swallowed up, right? In mute nostril agony. They're swallowed up or we linger in the chambers of the sea. Um, and also there's the second called Death by Water, which is based on tarot, but it plays into this. This is the uh, fourth section of the Wasteland. Phoebus the Phoenician, a fortnight dead, forgot the cry of gulls and the deep sea swell and the profit and the loss. The current undersea picked his bones in whispers. As he rose and fell, he passed the stages of his youth and his age and youth, entering the whirlpool. Gentile or Jew, oh, you who turned the wheel and looked to windward, consider Phoebus, who was once as handsome as tall as you. That section is about the speaker consulting a tarot reader about his future, and that conveys the brokenness of what will be the postmodern landscape, but is prescient of that, but is mainly talking about the modernist landscape that results from the physical fragmented landscape of World War One and the scarred land, right, of the trenches. But that is then almost by osmosis, it's what transmogrify. I don't know what the verb is. It is neural linked into the brain of all of the lost generation so that the landscape of their future seems fragmented. So, and I actually don't think that The Wasteland is a necessarily a negative poem. There are positive elements, especially at the end, right? Shanti, 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 um, uh, the peace which passeth all understanding, right? Now, it becomes ecumenical in that sense. But he's talking about sort of the oneness of the world healing, but he is talking about something positive and how the sort of fragmented postmodern landscape can be um, can be healed in that sense. So so at least he is quoting, see at the end he says, "This is what the thunder said," and he says, remember it ends with Sanskrit. That's interesting because it ends with Sanskrit, and we're about to see we're about to see the Oppenheimer movie come out, which is where, uh, Oppenheimer, of course, quotes what the Bhagavad Gita before he's about to set the world on fire. Right, and then he does it anyway. So anyway, that, of course, is the start of the postmodern era, the end of, World War II with the atomic bomb and the end of the modernist era, and that's sort of Eliot's, nightmare vision. So, let's move on to The Abyss. Let's talk about James Cameron's 1989 Abyss, and before I do that, I'm gonna, reload my drink here. I'll be right back. Y'all get ready. Alright. Alright, y'all, here we go. Before we get started with this last final section, everybody, can you please make sure you like and share the stream if you're enjoying what I'm doing here. Um, please check me out, watch my old streams. Make sure you check out my last stream on what was the last one I did? Black Mirror. We just did Black Mirror. Please go back to my old streams because yeah, because I think we're doing pretty solid work here. And of course, again, I will be going down south, but I will still be doing streams. I'll be doing one, I think, Monday with our friend David Patrick Harry. So yeah, check out my Black Mirror stream on Program and Control. The Jack Nicholson stream on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That one's not doing too bad. That one's got about 1,000 views. We're almost at 1,000 for Black Mirror. So that's good. The house that Jack built, the serial killer Calabasas stream, and then Killers of the Flower Moon is going to come out this summer, so that'll be a good one. But let's get back to what we were talking about with film. And rather than talk about films that are about to come out, we're going to talk about the film that came out in 1989. So this movie is called The Abyss, and this is James Cameron's 1989 film of that name. And this is an awesome movie. Okay, I mean, honestly, I've seen this movie many times just because it would come on HBO and stuff right now. But one of the interesting things about this movie is that, um, good luck finding it. I know where to find it because I found it at a certain place, but also you, you cannot find this movie on any, central streaming platform right now. You can't find it on, Blu-ray. They never made a Blu-ray, if people still buy Blu-rays. I think there was a DVD copy. I had a VHS copy, a while back. But part of this is because of development, post-development hell of the movie and the ownership of the rights and all this stuff. Also because you're hard pressed to find there is one documentary about the making of The Abyss where you actually get interviews with, Ed Harris and some of the cast, but Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio is not featured on this because she, refuses to talk about this movie. Now, here's my thought about people who refuse to talk about the movies that they were in. Now, on the one hand, I was an actor. I went to classical drama school. I was in theater and I did some commercials and I, was the lowest tier you can possibly be. But still, I know the acting world and I know people that are in it. And I don't really have any sympathy for actors complaining about their roles, especially when it comes to, actors on a Stanley Kubrick set. We've talked about Stanley Kubrick and all that stuff. Jim Cameron is certainly in the Stanley Kubrick universe in terms of his mentality and the way that he films movies, because people say, "Oh, this guy's a tyrant. He's a tyrannical director, right? He treats people like, whatever." Well, look, okay, here's the thing. Your job is to entertain, and occasionally to make great art, right? But think about what that means in terms of the way that people live. Like Richard Burton again said this pretty concisely. He said he was blessed to be an actor because he essentially played dress up for a living, whereas most of his family and friends were in the Welsh mines all day, right? There are people digging ditches for a living and trying to put food on the table for their family. And I know that actors are trying to do that in a sense too, but you're just entertaining people and occasionally making great art. So, and you're getting paid a lot of money to do it. So I don't really have any sympathy for that. Okay. Also, this is one of the examples of where a director is apparently a tyrant on the set. But guess what? Newsflash, buddy. Guess what? This dude can make a movie. Okay. James Cameron can make a movie. And The Abyss is definitely um, I mean, I would consider this maybe even one of the top 20 movies probably of the 20th century film. And I think that it takes an autocrat with a singular vision to be able to convey the thing that he did because it's so unlike anything else. For one thing, one of the weird things about this movie is that spoiler alert, it's not really look, the movie came out in 1989, so I don't care about spoilers. This is an alien movie. Did you know that? Do you remember that? That this is an alien movie? And that I think is actually I don't care about the aliens and all that stuff, and obviously, fake and gray and all that. But one of the cool things about the movie is that it has a genre switch in the middle of the movie and you don't know that it's an alien movie. It almost comes out of nowhere. But doesn't that fit? Because the aliens in the movie literally come out of nowhere. They come out of the titular abyss. Okay, so what's it about? Okay, so Ed Harris is a character named Bud Brigman. What a cool name. Like he's in the brig, right? Like this guy's automatically in the kind of military jail of his emotions. He's in a jail of his emotions. He's in the jail of his emotions, his relationship, his estranged relationship with Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio. Also, Stranged is interesting because remember that Estranged by Guns N' Roses was the most expensive music video ever made up to that point, and it involves what? A shipping liner, dolphins, whales, and an oceanic atmosphere, which is supposed to be it's supposed to be the macrocosm of the interstate of the characters in the music video. And it's the same thing in this movie that he's in an abyss of his existence because he's also literally working at the bottom of the ocean. So Bud Brigman, who by the way, his real name we find out in the movie is Virgil. This is great. I thought this was really clever because I'm sure people who analyze this movie um realize this point, but I thought it was pretty clever that James Cameron manages to sneak in a Dantean theme into a film, a big, big budget film about the military industrial complex and big oil and aliens. And then there's a Dantean theme because Virgil is constantly guiding the other people on the ship. He's the leader and he has to guide people in the ship along these hellish submarine, um, bottom of the world paths in order to, in order to find meaning, right? And in the end, he literally descends into the abyss, sans Dante, although he does have communication with one person back on the ship. And that part's cool because they're using an early form of text. But it's on a keypad on his arm. Okay, so here's what the movie's about. The movie starts with a submarine crew, of course, and they encounter something that they think is, of course, who are they going to blame it on? They're going to blame it on the Russians. This is 1989, so I guess the movie was made before the fall of the Berlin Wall. This is total Cold War because also it's cold in the depths of the ocean, but it's Cold War, and they think that the Russians have some sort of advanced tech. This is perfect for right now because this is what the NASA board is talking about with the UFOs. What are they calling it? The not UAVs. I forget what they call it now, but essentially they see the same thing, but it's underwater. And I guarantee you, well, let's make this prediction right now. You know how all of this is focused on aerial engineering and aerial movement, right? So people on airplanes and people on land and the terrestrial people are seeing extraterrestrial beings, right? And they're always captured with a camcorder, and it's always terrible. And they're saying it's moving Mach 7. Nothing could move Mach 7. Well, how much you want to bet this is going to move to nautical theme? They're going to, at some point, they're going to come out and say, we've got these things captured on sonar because that's exactly what happens in the movie, right? And they say this thing is moving at us at, um, 33 knots. It's moving at us at 322 knots. That's impossible, bonesman. And it's moving all over the place. And then it throws off the sonar almost in a whale fashion. It throws off the sonar and the sub dives right into the continental shelf or whatever. Okay. But the point is, all the people on the submarine die, but the submarine is a nuclear powered submarine armed with a nuclear warhead, of course, because they are. Well, then what they have to do is they show an oil rig crew somewhere in, I guess, the North Atlantic or whatever, probably North Atlantic where this thing just occurred. And they say, okay, the guy's on the phone and he's like, okay, so, the Secretary of the Navy or whoever has contacted me and he wants to be able to use our ship to go down because we're close to the crash site and we're going to send the SEALs down. You guys are going to have the SEALs in your underwater rig. It's called Deep Well. And we're going to go retrieve the warhead. Okay. So now we see Michael Biehn, who, by the way, is really good in this movie. You thought Michael Biehn was good as Johnny Ringo. Why, Johnny Ringo looked like somebody just walked all over your grave. Poor soul. He was just too high strung. So Michael Biehn appears with a mustache, and this is cool because this came out before, first of all, before the movie Navy SEALs, which was what, 1990? That was my favorite movie when I was 10, by the way, with Charles Sheen and Rick Rossovich and Michael Biehn, right? It comes out, and Bill Paxton. It comes out before that. And that movie was huge, was responsible for a ton of recruitment with Navy SEALs. Even to this day, I think they still say that when they ask the SEALs, like, how did you get in this movie? And sometimes they'll cite the movie Navy SEALs. So, I had the poster in my room and all this stuff. But this movie came out before that. And that's interesting because there are only so many examples of SEALs and special operators being mentioned kind of true to form in films of the 1980s. Like, when you actually think about it, there aren't that many examples. This is more of a 90s phenomenon. I mean, like people talking about SEAL Team 6, you know, like, that was a thing in the late '90s, people knew about that, but even when, post Big 9, when the Catherine Bigelow movie came out, Zero Dark 30, Catherine Bigelow also, of course, who is the former spouse of Jim Cameron. When that movie came out, SEAL Team 6 again kind of entered the popular parlance. So, this is an early version of SEALs, and we get Michael Biehn with a Master Chief, mustache, and they take the helicopter down, they get on the thing, and then, they communicate, through the tannoy or whatever down to Ed Harris. Now, Ed Harris, again, is Bud Virgil, and look, you instantly one of the things about this movie is this has the greatest cast. I mean, they really like, the cast in this is so good because, first of all, Ed Harris is instantly likable. You're going for the protagonist in this movie because he's a real ass dude on this deep sea oil rig, and they got all the tools and all the stuff there, and it's a bunch of hard MFers, right? And they're all these big dudes. but he's got kind eyes and he's a kind man and he treats them with kindness. He's firm, but he's kind. So you follow this guy. This guy's in charge. And by the way, what does he say to the guy up top? The guy says, "We're going to send the SEALs down and they're going to take over the deep sea brig and you're going to show them around." And Ed Harris says, "Negative. I'm the master of this deep sea rig. And on this place, there's me and I'm the only one who is right there below God on this ship. There's me, and I'm the master of the ship, and above me is God, and that's it." And I love that he said that. He's in charge, right? And so there's an instant hierarchy on this thing. Yes. So so then we see that he's connected to Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, who's in, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and she plays Tony Montana's sister in Scarface, and she's great in this movie too. So we know that they are an estranged husband and wife, and she designed the rig. She's a girl boss science woman, and she's all about logic. So she's all about logic. This is weird because this is late '80s, and this is getting into a '90s and 2000s thing with, female roles, but she's like there's twin pillars. There's her, and she represents logic in this movie, and he represents brawn and emotion, but not in a weak way. Okay, so it doesn't go into some kind of, you know, undermining of, relationships. It's just simply saying that these are 2 people and these are what they represent, and they're gonna have to make it work as a team to make this thing happen. So anyway, the SEALs get down there and they're talking, they're giving a lot of exposition and they're talking about how, um, they have to, decompress and all this stuff and the this is what happened on Oceangate, right? The ship the submersible implodes, and I don't know, who knows what they're gonna say about the science of that, but essentially the pressure is so much. Jim Cameron was saying in his interview, by the way, today, I saw on, I think it was with, Anderson Coomer. He was talking about how, the difference between his ship, his submersible that he designed, which was, by the way, made with Russian help, um, and the Oceangate vessel was that when he learned that the Oceangate vessel was made with carbon fiber, he was concerned because it was a carbon fiber submersible with 2 caps on it. And he said, "You have to have a contiguous material in your submersible in order to withstand the pressure of deep sea." We're going 20,000 feet down. So even an hour and a half in depth is enough to completely implode this thing. And it has to be made of something contiguous like steel or titanium or even acrylic. He was talking about some sort of future tech with acrylic, but I think his vessel was made of titanium. And he said he spent 3 years in the computer model phase, of design of his vessel in order to go to the Marianas Trench, right? So look, um, do I think that, Jim Cameron is, a transhumanist elite who, is heavily involved in propaganda in his films? Yes. But do I also think that, I could trust that if this guy's gonna go down into the deep sea, that he's gonna have the exact right vehicle to do that? Yes. Yes. If anybody's gonna do that, I would trust that he would do that, and because this guy's a spur for things like that, right? He even said, like, the submersible community is a very small community. That made me think, like, dude, I wonder if these guys, like, have a Discord and they're always just talking about submersibles. Not in like I don't mean that in like a, "Oh, that's cool" way. I just mean like, it's I like, you know, I like it. I think it's cool when dudes are being dudes and they're part of a community, whatever it is, even a submersible community, right? You see where I'm going? I mean, I just thought that was kinda cool. I don't like fawn over Jim Cameron or anything. I just think that, um I think he knows what he's talking about in this sense, and that, this guy is Mr. Science Man for the underwater stuff. So, yeah, that's what he does. You could trust his sort of his amateur opinion about this, but guided by these people. Yeah, somebody said, submersible community used to have a Giesel and Maxwell. There is some kind of tie, that I'm not the guy to establish that kind of tie or whatever, but I've seen people with threads talking about, um, PH or Hamish having some sort of funding from Giesland or Jeff Steineffrey, and I'm sure that that probably is true. One of them comes from Connecticut. That doesn't mean anything, per se, but, these guys are in that, elite club, so yes. Um, so anyway, so Jim Cameron's talking about the contiguous material on the submersible, and he incorporates that in The Abyss. So where they filmed The Abyss, just a little bit of nerd, filmography here, or filmology. He filmed, The Abyss in, an old, uh, disused nuclear tank in South Carolina. Shouts out to our friends in South Carolina. They know who they are out there, our good homies. Um, so I thought this was cool because what he said with this was he had gotten enough clout. He was wearing his clout goggles, and he'd gotten enough, super clout in Hollywood from Aliens 2 and from Terminator in order to sort of write his own ticket with this movie. So he asked the studio for a certain amount of money, and they gave it to him. And what he did with that was he used the kind, even though we are in the Don Simpson, um, high concept movie world at this point in terms of the 80s, Jim Cameron is a weird tech holdover of the 70s auteur director. So it's almost like he's a iconoclastic in terms of his vision of the movies. Okay, so so what he did was, he said, "We don't want CGI. We don't want any kind of green screens for the bulk of this movie, especially the acting scenes underwater." Most of the movie obviously takes place, in a dry scenario, like in the actual, um, deep well rig. Okay, but the parts that are underwater, he had to invent a new kind of helmet. So first he had the crew come down and, they scuba trained for 2 weeks, and, they got used to the water, and then he put them in the tank, and the tank is absolutely enormous, and so they put all the film sets underwater. Then what he did was he blocked out the surface of the water with, like, some sort of black balls, like black marbles, so that it would be absolutely impervious, like, it would be totally opaque. There would be no ambient light. The only light would be from the lights on the rig itself. So that creates a problem because then you can't see the actors. So one thing about actors is you have to, it's in their contract, especially, you have to see their face. For the drama to work, you have to be able to see their facial expressions because especially Hollywood film lives in the eyes and the face of the actors. So what he did was he created a new helmet that allowed them to not just be breathing the normal scuba gear, but it would be a a helmet covering their entire head where they can breathe dry in the helmet, and it's got lights so their faces are illuminated so we still get the drama, right? And that is still used. I mean, they invented that, and they still used it. And this is a great example of art and, art influencing life, right? Art creating, creating tech, or the moment that you have to use your, what we were talking about earlier, the sort of American, I mean, he's Canadian, but this sort of Western, or Western idea of, like, ingenuity in difficult circumstances, even if it's for an artistic work, right? So he does that, and what happens is they are going to, they have all this exposition about how the, the pressure down below can give the people the bends, and then they give the symptoms, and it seems like exposition at the time, but of course, this is gonna be Chekhov's gun, right? Because we know that the seeming put together Alpha Chad Michael Bion SEAL is gonna turn into the unhinged nuke wielding psychopath. And that is a slow burn throughout the movie because he's constantly being affected more and more by the pressure, not only the emotional pressure and the pressure of his duty of finding the nuke, but also the loss of communication and the physical pressure of the atmosphere. So the pressure down in the sea is getting to him, and him alone, really. Everybody else is used to it. They even make, okay, they even make an example, and they say, like, it affects 1 in 20 people, and there's about 20 people in the cast, and, he's the guy that's affected by this. So, you notice that his hands start to shake, and then they shake more and more throughout the film. He starts to sort of hallucinate and get paranoid, and, yes, thank you, Nico. The bends when you rise too fast, but whatever that is for when you're getting oxygen, deprivation, and pressure sickness down below. I forget what you call that. Um, hypoxia, basically, it's like a slow hypoxia. And so, so what they do is they have to rig up some of the guys from the rig up some of the guys from the rig, and they have to go and take the submersibles out to the submarine, make their way through the passages of the submarine, and find the nuke, and then bring the nuke back to the rig. Well, they do that, but what happens is one of the guys, Jammer, who plays the St. Louis mob boss in Ozark, that dude's 6'5". His name is Jammer in the movie. And this guy's cool because when he's down there, when they're in the submarine, he sees the dead sailors and he's heavily traumatized by this. And at one point, when he's alone, they leave him alone in a room and he is confronted by a vision, a vaporwave vision of glowing purple. And it turns out to be in the movie, one of the aliens. Now, the aliens in the movie are clearly supposed to be the kind of interdimensional being watchers, and they exist, of course, in the James Cameron world. They exist in this theosophical way where they either panspermiad people on Earth, or at the very least, they are watching to make sure that we don't destroy ourselves, right? That's the way it always is in the movies, and that happens in the movie. But what's interesting is that, like, this is one of the first examples of that in movies, or one of the best examples. So at least it's like a clear vision. So when the underwater demon alien appears um, to Jammer, he actually thinks it's an angel, and he goes into cardiac arrest, and he has a epileptic seizure, and they bring him back, and he goes into a coma, and then he appears, by the way, later on in the film, in at just the right circumstance, and he unlocks the door. He opens the portal for them to survive because at that point they're locked into this thing, and the seal has locked them in, and the nuke is about to go off. But he appears like an angel, okay, an angel of circumstance. But when he does, he says, "Yeah," he says, "Yeah, it's like when that angel appeared to me," and they're all kind of like, "Uh huh, yeah, yeah." But it's interesting that the angelic aliens, also have so weird, what would you call this? Jellyfish butterfly wings. So it becomes there's obvious, like, monarch symbolism in this, because, I mean, if anything, Michael Bion's Navy SEAL character is having his psyche split through circumstance, right? He's not being MK Ultra traumatized, right? They're not breaking his psyche and inducing DID, but he does fracture his mind and then he goes into another realm of psychiatric possibility, I suppose. So so anyway, they bring him back to the ship and they've got the nuke, but then there's a hurricane. There's a Deus ex machina. There's a hurricane up on the surface, and it's got an umbilical that is feeding the oxygen down. So the ship is up here on the surface. It's got this gigantic tube that goes down to the deep well rig where these crew members are deep sea welders, right? These guys are hard, right? One of the guys, the best character in the movie is named Cat, and he's got a USMC tattoo on his arm, and that guy's badass because he appears later on when Michael Biehn is fighting Ed Harris, and he goes, "Bam!" And he just knocks him on his ass right in the water. That guy is cool. I love that guy. But yeah, so the ship is up on the surface, and they're being battered by this hurricane, and so down below, they can't get the umbilical off of the rig, and using the submersible with its robot arms. It's the same one they have in Aliens too, by the way. They always have this kind of exoskeleton robot clipper Dr. Gadget arm. So they can't get that off. So then it actually the crane falls off of the ship, and then with that, it brings it down and that falls right off the continental shelf, I guess, into the trench or into the abyss. And Cat even um, points out that it's a bottomless pit, right? This thing is, I suppose I guess it's the Marianas Trench or some other sort of mid-Atlantic trench. It's something. And when the crane falls, it drags the deep well rig, and it's plummet into the abyss, right? Well, that doesn't happen. But then what they have to do is they lose communication with the people at the top, and before they do that, the SEAL commander up on the ship tells them, we're in DEFCON 2 because we know it was probably the Russians who crashed the submarine, and they got some sort of future tech, and oh, by the way, one of the things they also say is they say, "We we've spotted on sonar the Russian subs in the area recently, and they've all departed, so it must be them." So, you one thing that's cool about this is that Cameron is aware as the sort of speaker of the poetic film that, he's aware that even at the height of at the very climax of the Cold War, that it's ridiculous to think that the Russians did this just because of circumstances, right? Why would they do this? Why would they do it? Now, of course, it turns out to be the aliens, and the aliens crashed it because they don't want the nukes anywhere near the humans. So, so they say you need to arm the nuke just in case. So, of course, Michael Biehn proceeds to arm the nuke. He makes it operational, and then they go into the next phase, which is they're going to blow the nuke up. Well, when they do that, Ed Harris has to retrieve the nuke from Michael Biehn. He has to take it away, and he does this by. Oh, I don't understand how the physics of this work. By the way, can somebody explain this to me? If you're in the deep well, okay, I'm a slow boy with this. If you're in the deep well, right, and you are completely you're submerged in water. How are they able to open the hatch on the bottom of the deep well and then swim into the water, and the water doesn't rush into the thing? Is it because water doesn't travel upwards? But even if that's the case, there's water all around them. Is it because they're not moving? Can somebody explain that to me? I know that's a really slow question, but somebody explain that to me. How the water doesn't rush into the open hatch? Because if you're on a ship and you open up a hole appears at the bottom of the ship, the water rushes inwards. Is it because of all the pressure? Because of the high pressure? Or the differences in pressure? I don't know. Somebody explain that to me. But regardless, they open up the hatch and they take the, bottom portal out into the abyssal world, and they have to go from one place to the next and make their way into this other hatch because Michael Biehn and the SEALs have hermetically sealed themselves into this thing, and they're gonna arm the nuke. So Ed Harris goes in there and it's like, dude, there's a scene where he's walking up and he finds this big metal pipe and he's about to bop him on the head. It's like, dude, just bop him on the head, man. You don't have to go up and try and retrieve the gun because, of course, at the last minute, Michael Biehn turns around and he sees him and he's got the gun and he pulls the gun on him because the he's a SEAL, right? So that's weird. So all I'll say is about that is that the fight that takes place is pretty cool. The best part of this is when they have to take the submersible and basically follow Michael Biehn out with the nuke, with the warhead, and he ends up falling Biehn ends up falling into the abyss, and it's almost a sad moment because the look on his face is like, this guy has been so, like, depre pro pressurized or whatever by this situation. He's kind of at a loss, but he he is still using his will to do these things. So it's like the guy's not completely programmed. He knows what he's doing. So then what happens is Mary Elizabeth Master Antonio says, "You take." Thank you, Nate. Air pressure holds the water back. Thank you. Yeah, total slow boy with the physics of it. In fact, I hate it when you're watching some television show and they say physics. Like that explains everything. Physics. Okay, great. So thank you, Nate. Appreciate it. So so there's only one helmet and there's one oxygen tank, so they got to make it all the way back to the rig. And she says, because she's girl boss, she says, "You take the helmet." And you're like, "No, you take the helmet and you take the pressure." But she does make a good point. She says, "Look, you've already got the stuff on. By the time you take all this the oxygen tank off and put the helmet on me, um, it'll be too late and I'll make it. And also, I can't drag you back. You're a man, you're stronger, you can swim me back. And because I'll go into hypothermia, my heart rate will slow down and then I'll die, but you can bring me back." And so she makes a good case, but it's also like, dude, he takes her underwater and then he watches her drown and then he starts swimming. Just start swimming right away. But regardless of that, what happens is he swims her back to the rig. They come back up. he pulls out the defibrillator, and this is one of the classic. In movies when you have the clear, clear, right? That comes from this movie. This is the movie that comes from. And so he's saying, do the defibrillator. They're giving her oxygen. They're giving her CPR. And this is a great scene. I got to say, this scene is really good because she is dead. She looks dead. She's died and she is gone. And they even tell her she's gone. And Ed Harris kind of stops. And then he's, oh man, this gives me chills, folks, to even think about it. He says, no, you're a fighter. She wants to live. And maybe this got to me because of the thing that happened to me recently. I don't know. I mean, this affected me before this because how can you not look in a person's eyes and be aware that, God gives us a will to live. He gives us an incredible strength, right? Life is fiery with its beauty, its incredible detail. Remember, I saw the aftermath of the motorcycle wreck I told you about, and the guy was lying on the side of the road, and his face was all cut up, and that guy was unconscious. And I was looking in that guy's eyes, and I was in the back of my mind, I was afraid that this guy was gonna die because this is the exact type of thing that would happen, right? We're driving along and we see a motorcycle wrecked in a ditch on the side of the road and a guy lying with his head in the road. And it's like, pull over here, don't ride in the ditch, stay in the car, stay here, right? And but at the same time, it's like I don't wanna say I had this voice telling me this, but, like, as a person that, like, somehow this guy I just knew this dude wanted to live. He was gonna live, and then watching him so a guy called 911, and I was scooping blood out of his mouth and his eyes and all this stuff, and I was afraid that he'd broken his neck, so I didn't wanna turn him over and all this stuff, like, this guy had a will to live. You could see that there was a spark in him, and even though he had his eyes closed and his eyes are rolling back in his head, when he finally came to, this guy was gonna live, and that's what happens in the scene. He knows that she wants to live, and he slaps her. He slaps her, and then he beats on her chest, and he gives her he breathes, he's CPRing her, and then she wakes up, and it's I'm not making it sound like it's great drama because that's is kind of a trope now in movies, but this is the movie that gave us that. This is the example of them doing this to somebody, and he he she wakes up, and she's been to the other side, she's woken up, and his love and his duty and his husbandly duty and his energy and his God gave this guy the fight to make her have the fight to wake up. So she wakes up. So then what happens is, the next part is that he has to go and get the nuke because when Michael Biehn was in the submersible, he took the nuke down with him. So now they've tracked it and it's on a ledge of this chasm, right? So the only way they can get down there because of the pressure is this new oxygenated water that they've invented. Apparently, this is a real thing, and they test it with the rat in the movie. Remember, the guy has the pet rat, and that's a hard scene to watch. I hated that, but thankfully, the rat is okay. The rat lives, and so they tried to do this with Ed Harris in the movie. They tried to actually get him to do this, but the fight to not breathe water is so strong, right? It's like the will to live, so he couldn't do it. So the filming of it was difficult because he had to film it like acting like he was drowning. So they fill his helmet with this kind of pink ammonia looking oxygenated water and he's essentially breathing water, and that allows him to go to have more oxygen because it's gonna take a long time to get down there, and the pressure won't make him implode or whatever. So he gets in this, like, kind of spacesuit, and he goes into the chasm, and he's got a way of communicating back with the rig, which, by the way, is texting, it's early texting, and it's cool in the movie because it they don't understand. It's like you're watching them and they don't understand texting at all, and he's typing out full words on this keypad, right? But this is 1989, and, like, that's where this is crazy to see it in the movie. So he goes down and he retrieves the nuke and he disarms it. But while he's down there, he doesn't have enough time or enough oxygen to get back up. And he tells her he knew it was a one-way ticket when while he's down there, Because remember, his name is Virgil, so he's taking his trip down to the abyss, talking back to Dante up in the rig. And what happens? The alien comes, and first of all, the alien also, just like in the movie Red Planet, which I rewatched recently, which by the way is like highly predictive. It's got corporate space, it's got Hughes Tool Co., right, which is why NASA's in Houston. Um, it's got texting, it's got smartphones. It's got a lot of stuff in it. That's a great Val Kilmer movie. And plus he's got his clout goggles on. So one thing is that, and that is that it's got DARPA dogs, and the DARPA dog is known as Amy, has a military function, but shoots out a drone scout. And the same thing occurs in this, but with the aliens. The aliens have a kind of a reconnaissance alien, but they send out a kind of a reconnaissance mini alien drone that flies up and sees him. He reaches out, and then the other alien comes up, takes him, and then takes him down into the abyss. So he's taken down into the abyss where he sees the glowing space city at the bottom of the ocean. And it's a spaceship that's submerged, right? Because panspermia, the aliens apparently got here and been living at the bottom of the ocean, watching over humans. They're the watchers. They're the Great White Way. It's the Great White Brotherhood, and they're down there, and they take him into the ship, Star Wars style, like in Empire Strikes Back, when he goes through the tubes, and then all of a sudden the water creates a water gate or an ocean gate, and it's water, it backs up, he takes off his helmet, and now it's pure oxygen and he can breathe. And the aliens save him because the ship rises, it ascends. He ascends, bro. And he texts them back and he says, wait till they get a load of me, or something like that. And it also takes the um the oil rig ship, and everything's on it, and it's got 12 gates to it, or 12 um powers that surround this round, alien theosophical ship. And the movie ends with an ascension, right? So he was dead and now he lives, but it's because of the aliens. So what I'm saying is that the other thing is that the aliens appear earlier in the film in one of the great scenes. They the alien appears through the water portal or the ocean gate at the bottom of the ship, and Donnie Darko style goes makes its way through the ship, and then when it sees them, it mimics their faces, but it's like a water trail. Now we saw this in Donnie Darko, the exact same thing. Except in Donnie Darko, it represents a couple things. It's like the passage of time, whether they are in an alternate universe that occurred because of the split, because of the as a result of the Big Nine event plane engine falling on the house. Um, is it backwards time, and now as backwards and forwards are moving towards a singular point or a singularity? Or is it a kind of a Gnost again? I mean, Donnie Darko is a Gnostic movie, so is it a Gnostic vision of the paths of the soul moving its way through the prison planet to show Donnie Darko, whose personality is split, right? He dissociates in the movie, and he's walking around with the knife, and he tries to stab the mirror, so the blade reflects both him and the mirror, and the mirror becomes aqueous, right? It turns into this matrix portal vision of the other side of reality, or into the spirit realm. So Donnie Darko, like, is guided by his kind of other self, or his spirit guide through this dimension, right? And it's the same thing in this movie. I thought it was weird that the alien mimics the humans, because mimicry obviously is a sign of some sort of, it's like a demonic sign, like that, and it's good in the movie because it's like it's nice, but it's clearly not an angel. Even though it makes it look like they're angels because they're saving the humans. But I just see this as another sort of transhuman theosophical movie where the people are being saved by the Watchers and the aliens. So in other words, that's the paradigm of the movie, which is unexpected and unusual, and it's like one of the big major versions of that, and one of the first ones to do that. But um but so it's interesting that it does that. Now, I don't agree with, like, the worldview in the movie. I'm just saying that the movie is well done in the sense that it shows us that, like, unlike other movies have done. So, again, the movie is about a transcending and an ascending from the nuclear world of meanies to each other and the Great White Brotherhood, Blavatsky alien demons of the abyss are there to save humans in this movie. Now, again, that's I don't like that, of course. That's not, that's not our paradigm, but it is interesting that the movie shows us that, and it's a great example of that. Also, the fact that um that yeah, so maybe like Demon 79, the demon appears in friendly form. Yes, it's exactly the same thing. How Gap, the demon in Demon 79, the last episode of Black Mirror, go back to my Black Mirror, analysis that I just did, here's in just the same fashion. And look, um, what's happening in this and Donnie Darko, or sorry, in Demon 79 and Donnie Darko, well, it's guiding them to eliminate other people in order to save the world. It's essentially the same story, right? Demon 79, not Cabin in the Woods. Is it Cabin in the Woods? Um, Knock at the Cabin, the latest, M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong movie, and Donnie Darko are all 3 sort of the same version of the same theme, different versions of the same theme. This movie is different than that because it's not asking them to eliminate people, even though it is the narrative is asking us to go with Michael Biehn where while he eliminates all humans from the planet with his nuke, because it's gonna set off the nuclear war. So I guess it is kind of the same thing, and we're saved by the isn't it weird that these movies always have a demon that comes and asks humans to sacrifice other humans in order to save humanity, right? Isn't that weird? They always do that. Um, but I guess that's what we can expect from, the, pyramid paradigm elite class, perverts who, um, who propagate this stuff, right? But that being said, Jim Cameron knows how to make a movie. He definitely knows how to make a damn movie, and this is a great one. It's almost a perfect movie in terms of its symbolism, its framing, its high drama amidst a technological ambiance. Like the characters are low characters because they're literally low in the water. They're low because they're working class, right? They're not the elites who are aboard who own the ship. Um, but there's this dichotomy in terms of the hierarchy between them and the guys up there who, when all is said and done, have to rely on them, right? The everyday people, the good people, are the people that they have to rely on, especially the characters like Kat. And all of the characters in this are so good. The actors in this movie, I cannot stress enough how I think that this is like the ensemble cast that was assembled like in an almost perfect way. Everybody in this movie is so good. And so again, when I hear people like actors talking about how Um, you know, "Oh, it was hellish, and I'll never do that again." Okay, fine. But guess what? You managed to do it once, and you managed to be a part of something that is great. Because I think this is a great work of art. This movie is great. It's a great vision. It's even more powerful than Titanic. I told you my theory about Titanic, by the way, which I pretty much hijacked from Nick Mullen. Um, but that Billy Zane is actually the good guy in the movie because Jack is the demon of the abyss, right? He hangs out with, yes, I mean, he's hanging out with the prostitutes, he's hanging out in the bowels of the ship and all that stuff, but, like, he teaches her to spit, he teaches her all those are small symbols for, he deflowers her in the car and you see the foggy glass of the car with her handprint, and, of course, and whenever we get glass in movies, it's always some symbol of the psyche or of the character's state of mind. So he takes away her innocence, and I'm not saying any one of those is a thing. I'm just saying that all those put together, and the fact that at the end of the movie, he is she's floating on this door, a door, a gate, an ocean gate, a door into the dark, Seamus Heaney says, and she is hanging he's hanging on this thing, and then he falls into the abyss, is like, is this guy some sort of Luciferian trickster character? Whereas Billy Zane's like, they're like, "Well, you wanna be in this movie, but you're bald." And he's like, "I'll wear a wig. Just put me in a wig. No big deal. Just put me in a wig." And then what happens at the end, by the way, in the conclusion, right? They're on the same submersible ship. And she walks out, the old lady, she first of all, she grosses out Bill Paxton because she's talking about all her pervert stuff. He don't wanna hear that. She's like, "I had many affairs in my day," and he's like, "Oh, gross. That's gross, lady." And then she walks out and to the "I am the king of the world" place, very weird speech there, right? And what does she do? She takes the most expensive, biggest hope diamond in the world, oops, and throws it into the abyss. It's like, lady, you could have fed this entire city with that diamond, right? Instead, she went back, she got her liberation, she, learned how to fly Amelia Earhart style, and she's all lonely. She does have a kid because her redheaded kid or whatever is with her on the thing. But it's like, dude, Billy Zane was offering you this life, man. Now I'm being partly facetious there, but still, it is a funny movie. Titanic is not a funny movie. I actually wept when I saw it in 1998 in the theater with my sister. But that's because when I go see movies with my sister, I guess I become very sensitive. I cried when I watched Armageddon with her in the theater. Oh, Ben Affleck. um, but I'm a sensitive, poetic soul, so that's fine. No, but that old lady sucked. Yes, and and Bill Paxton's like, man, did you guys hear that? This old lady's wow. Okay, man. So anyway, so that is The Abyss, and, before I get to the super chats, anybody have any questions? If you have any questions or anything about The Abyss or Jim Cameron, because again, the point of this was again to not just to offer some sort of, social commentary or some sort of, um, whoa, schizo metaverse, um uh, simulation commentary or something like that on the events that have happened. It was simply to say, my thesis for this is that literature is revelatory and predictive. And in the hierarchy of Bloom's taxonomy, if you want to take it there, you know, prediction and then creation come at the climax of that particular pyramid. So I think it's important to exercise our critical thinking skills and our understanding of our worldview by reading literature because these things are often in them and we can better understand the world through reading books, especially works in the canon and watching classic movies. That's art. Art is there for us. People make art to help us understand who we are and why are we here and who we are. So I think that is that's the point of why I did this. And again, not to make light. I didn't want to do anything in bad taste, right? So I've avoided any kind of discussion of um, what I think about the particular events in particular, because I do think that I don't I pray for them. I want I want people to live. I want people to live and find salvation. And so who am I? I'm just some dude talking about it. So hopefully they did that right. But we can talk about these things and discuss what they mean in kind of a paradigmatic sense. So anyway, so that's that. So let's look at some of the super chats. Have we got any super chats tonight? Shouts out to you guys for being here on this Friday night, just after the summer solstice. Uh-oh. Do you realize all this occurred right at the solstice? Illuminate confirm. That's another thing that's thrown into there. Also, not to mention the military operations that were taking place almost simultaneously with what's it called, Operation Warrior Shield, and the partnership between the two, you know, um, East Asia and the two of the big three, right? in the South China Sea recently. If you want to look that up, I don't really want to. I can't really go into that, but if you want to go look that up, shouts out to Robert, who. Oh, shouts out. Hold on, let me start over here. Let me start over. Let me go back because I had a couple of super chats. Um, After the last stream, people were so generous. So again, shouts out to our homeboy Matt out there, because Matt is a good friend of mine, and he sent me $20 last week. So shouts out to Matt. Shouts out also to Maddie the Real Cooter Brown, who also supported us through super chats recently. Shouts out to Amptown, who sent $5 via PayPal. Thank you so much, Amptown. Shouts out to our homeboy Jason, who sent $5 via PayPal. Thank you so much. Shouts out to Evan, who sent 20 bucks. Yep, $20 via PayPal. Thank you so much, Evan. Really appreciate you, homeboy. Shouts out to Alan, who sent $15 via PayPal. Thank you so much for supporting me. You guys, this really means a lot to me. You have no idea how much that means to me, and it helps me go on my trip tomorrow because I'm getting on a plane and going down south, and so I can really use your support for this little bit of holiday that I get to get down there. Remember last time I went down was in at Christmas time, and I drove my car and I got stranded in a snow tornado on the side of the road in Alabama. That sucked. That's why I'm not taking the do ride, the hoopty this time. Shouts out to Mixky out there, homeboy at Tech Noir Graphics. Shouts out to I think I gave Michelle last time just in case. Shouts out to her. Also, Adam was a big sponsor of a stream last time, and Jason sent $10. Oh, I missed Thomas Henderson, who sent $20 last time at the end of the stream. Shouts out to our homeboy TH Evan, who sent $20. Thank you so much, Evan. Really, 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 really appreciate you. Um, if you want to support me, you want to ask me questions about the the Jim Cameron oeuvre or about anything in literature, don't forget you can support me anytime with these links. And you can also send me super chats. I watched a bunch of films this week because, well, I won't say why, but I watched a bunch of films. And well, I was teaching a class on decoding films. So anyway, so I watched 2001: A Space Odyssey again, along with Guy Ritchie's The Covenant, Red Planet, um, There Will Be Blood. I talked about that the other night, and the correlations with 2001. That was basically the theme was basically the hero's journey and um, understanding paradigms in film. So I've seen a bunch of films that have come out recently, and a bunch more to come. Shouts out to Max, who said, "God bless, safe travels, big homie," who sent $40 via Venmo. Hey, thank you so much, Max. Really appreciate you out there, big homie. Thank you so much. That means a lot. Shouts out to our homeboy Joe, who sent $10 via Venmo, said, "Great stuff. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you." Um, let's see. Oh, Dono Chat. Yeah, Dono Chat is still around. Dono Chat is still there. If you want to drop the links in Dono Chat, yeah, of course. Do I not have that right there? Let me grab it for you real quick. You can support me via Dono Chat, of course, which is our homeboy Andrew, and our homegirl Rachel Wilson at Based Homeschool Mom, who is absolutely killing it. Love you out there, Rachel and Andy, especially Rachel has been killing it. You may have seen her recently on TNT Radio Live or heard her with Ruckus. That was great. She's doing a bunch of appearances. They're both very busy. So thank you. If you want to support me via Dono Chat, you can always do that. Hopefully it's working. It wasn't working a little while ago, but all these things get glitches, so it's not their fault, of course. So you can support me on there. Um, shouts out to TZ, our homeboy TZ out there who drops $10 via Cash App. Yo, thank you, longtime friend TZ, who's always in the chats and is one of the best mods on all these channels. And so thank you so much, TZ out there, our wise homeboy. Shouts out, oh, yo, big Luminate confirmed coming in. Shouts out to our homeboy Tech Noir Graphics. Please go to his PayPal. I mean his Instagram at Tech Noir Graphics. He's right there in the chat. Go to some of his Bazed artwork. He is our great friend. He sends 33 Luminate bucks via Cash App, which is a extraordinary help to me to keep doing what I'm doing. So thank you so much, Mick. I really, really appreciate you. I love you. Um, let's look and see if we have anything on in the super chats. And let me go here. And shouts out to shouts out to Elias who sends 10 bucks and says via super chat and says Kubrick refused to fly or drive in a car going more than 30 miles an hour. Oceangate confirms the man's caution. LOL. Have a great trip. Thank you, Elias. Longtime supporter here. Really appreciate you. And we're gonna have a lot more Kubrick coming up. I've been working with my friends Matt and Lukeski over there, and we need to get something together for you guys so we can talk about Kubrick, especially 2001: A Space Odyssey. I mentioned in the last couple streams that one of the things that I discovered in this most recent viewing of 2001, a couple things. One is that when Dave is in the space pod, I know I've said this recently, but when Dave is in the space pod, open the pod bay doors, how he gets messages on his iPad screens. This is 1968, and it looks like LOL, OMG, and meme. Which is pretty interesting. Also, there's the I talked about this on Maddie, the Real Cooter Brown Digital Minefields channel. Also, the other thing is the fact that, the monolith appears at 3 different phases in the movie, and that movie has a huge correlation with There Will Be Blood, obviously, honestly, which is very strange because Daniel Plainview is really like this Frank Norris naturalistic character in the film who plays a kind of antithesis to the Rockefeller structure in the movie. But of course, again, he is a almost a beast character. He begins the movie down below in an abyss. Again, he is in a silver mine, which then turns into an oil well, and he is in the black goo. So he arises like the cosmic pond scum out of the black goo, and then begins his Odyssean quest, where he uses everyone and everything to gain some sort of understanding and dominance in the world, including killing his fake brother, his fake imposter brother, and, he adopts a child, Moses style, but on land in the movie, but then, throws him out at the conclusion of the movie. Um, so one thing that happens in 2001 is the monolith appears 3 times in the movie, and every time the monolith appears, it looks, it's in the shape of an iPhone, and the first instinct is for the people to walk up and touch it, which is to say that they're gaining information from this otherworldly radioactive, you know, R RFID radioactive black cube, which is pretty interesting in the movie. Um, so so that was 2001. Let me look back here. Yeah, again, thank you, Elias, for that $10. Thank you to Nico, who drops 199 and says, Bravo. Thank you so much, Nico. Really appreciate you. Shouts out to Nico again. He says, Are you a diver, BLA? I'm a diver in the sense that I can hold my breath for 5 minutes and 31 seconds underwater, and that is confirmed. And it only can be in water. And do you know why I can do that? But I'm not a scuba diver. I went to Mexico and I like the shirt. No, but no, but seriously though, uh, I will outswim or outdive anybody here. And when we have our meetup one day at Cozumel or Cancun, I challenge anybody to a diving or swimming competition because I can outswim anybody here. Current record holder in swimming, former mile swimmer in the ocean, and also I can hold my breath that long. You know why? You know what my secret is? Because I'm willing to do anything, even die to win the holding your breath competition underwater. No, but I've been doing that since I was little, and, one of the reasons is the abyss, like, I watched the movie when I was 9 years old, and it actually I love the underwater scenes. I love how they are able to hold their breath so long underwater. I always thought that was cool, so I could still, do that. That sounds like AJ bragging. "Listen, folks, I'm not bragging, but I can hold my breath for 7 minutes and 99 seconds underwater." No, shouts out to Nico also who drops 50 bucks, and again, he had the comment about Strange Days. Shouts out to Jack out there who drops 5 bucks, $5 super chat. So thank you so much, Jack. Really appreciate you. Um, I don't know, let's look at the dono chat before we head out here and before I leave you with Sting and cut off his new album. And that's never going to get old for me, by the way. Um, so give me 1 second here, and Let's check the old donut chat, see if there's anything. Okay. Oh, we had a $4 donut chat the other day. Darn, I'm late. I was so impressed with your Killers of the Flower Moon analysis. I bought a copy. Hey, Circle G, thank you so much. And I'm sorry I didn't see that earlier. So thank you so much for that donut chat. I really appreciate you, Circle G. Don't be mad that I didn't see that because it's just popped up for me. So thank you. What says Gattaca? Yeah, we could do a Gattaca. We could do a who's the guy who directed Gattaca? He's a dystopian director. I was just thinking about his name recently because he also did the movie In Time. Um, and honestly, Jay did a Gattaca analysis, so you should check that out over at Jay's analysis. And let's see. Oh, shouts out to Essa who sends me $5 on Cash App. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. What was that movie called? Gattaca, and the director. That's a great movie. The director is Andrew Niccol, and Andrew Niccol did The Truman Show. He did In Time and The Truman Show, and of course, I mean, look, if you wanna see The Truman Show analysis, go to Jay's channel because he does great work on The Truman Show. I don't think if anybody has done a better analysis than our homeboy JD out there, and, so the last thing I'll leave you with here is The Chamber of Dallas. This is by Oliver Wendell Holmes. Now, this is a 19th century American poem, but this is great because the Chambered Nautilus is a great poem that deals with the very themes that we're talking about. And of course, the Nautilus is the name of the ship in 2001 A Space. I mean, 2001 in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea that we were just talking about. And a Nautilus, you see it on the old 80s workout machines. The Nautilus is the seashell. And the seashell contains, the golden mean or the gold, whatever what do you call it? What do you call that thing? The golden, not the golden mean, the golden ratio. The golden ratio, and it's an example of where, pi, where microcosmic and macrocosmic reflect one another. The chambered nautilus is the same as the spiral galaxy. So what he says in this is the ship of pearl, like Jim Morrison's Ship of Fools. This is the ship of pearl, which poets feign sails the unshadowed main, the venturous bark that flings on the sweet summer wind its purpled wings in gulfs enchanted, where the siren sings, and coral reefs lie bare, where the cold sea maids rise to sun their streaming hair, which ties into Sylvia Plath's Lady Lazarus, right? Its webs of living gauze no more unfurl. Wrecked is the ship of pearl, and every chambered cell where its dim, dreaming life was wont to dwell as the frail tenant shaped his growing shell. Before thee lies revealed its irised ceiling rent, its sunless crypt unsealed. Because the seashell of the Nautilus represents a crypt, a sealed crypt. So it becomes the vessel of life in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and also the vessel of death. It's where they're entombed. And that is almost a fitting requiem for the thing that's just happened, right? In the news, year after year, behind this silent toil that spread his lustrous coil. It's because it's luminous, it's lustrous. Still, as the spiral grew, he left the past year's dwelling for the new. Stole with soft step its shining archway through, filled up its idle door, stretched in his last found home, and knew the old no more because the way the seashell looks, the nautilus looks, it grows along with each chamber grows and represents a time period or a phase of one's life. Thanks for the heavenly message brought by thee, child of the wandering sea, cast from her lap forlorn. From thy dead lips a clearer note is born than ever Triton blew from wreathed horn. While on mine ear it rings through the deep caves of thought, I hear a voice that sings. Now this is Eliot, right? I hear the mermaids singing each to each, right? Till human voices wake us and we drown. Build thee more stately mansions, oh my soul, as the swift seasons roll, as the oceans roll, and as your life rolls out, and as the chambered nautilus continues to roll out in its spiral form. Leave thy low vaulted past. Let each new temple, nobler than the last, shut thee from heaven with a dome more vast, till thou at length art free, leaving thine outgrown shell by life's unresting sea. So he's saying the chambered nautilus represents the kind of shell that human beings have, where phases of our life we outgrow these things and we seek to build more stately mansions in our life. But of course, in my father's house, there are many mansions. And so when he says, "Oh, my soul," remember, poetry is valuable real estate. So whenever you have the letter O in a poem, whenever you have the singular letter O, remember O in T.S. Eliot, O, 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 that Shakespearean rag, right? Whenever you have O in King Lear, it represents the yawning gulf, or it represents the soul opening itself up and crying out in a kind of primal anguish for salvation. So that is a fitting epitaph for the thing that's just happened, right? And of course, um, we'll see where that goes and everything, but I think it's interesting that these things again come into being in this kind of nexus point of literature, art, the MIC, and all of these areas that we always talk about. And literature is the great prism through which we can see the world. So, so I think that will cover it tonight. Again, shouts out to Essa for that $5 cash app. And thank you to everybody for being so generous tonight. If you want to continue to support me, please share the stream. You guys, you can drop links to any number of my streams anywhere. Put them on channels where you want to see me, if you see people talking about things that we've talked about, because we're trying to build and we're going to continue to try to grow. We're doing really well here, but we also need we're doing the best we can here with our base chat and our content, but we also are continuing to grow without compromising any of the stuff that we built on. I'm not going to compromise that. Any of the methods that I use, or obviously any of the things that I've espoused in the past. None of that. I'm never going to compromise any of that. Never. But we can reach out and get more people and a bigger audience and do those things, But you know what? We're having fun and we're discussing important things here, but with a bit of fun and irony. So thank you for being here with me tonight. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all soon. I'll let you know how I'm doing down south and I'll report back to you on I think Monday is when I'll be on with DPH, and so, I look forward to that, and I hope you guys look forward to it. So, that being said, let's go to our homeboy, Rooks G. Please go to his channel and subscribe. Go to his SoundCloud. And, Operation Neptune, which is a fitting track to end this. So, to play us out, here is Operation Neptune. Take it away. Cheers, y'all. Love you.
Visual 117, 2 1 1 8, 2 1 8, 2 1 7.